be up first.
You're a while, Jamie, so you can go back to work.
Got it.
Can you see me?
Got it.
Perfect.
Okay.
Morning, Nancy.
Good morning.
Okay,
Morning.
it's 9 o'clock, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll begin with our land acknowledgement. At the Township of Severn, we recognize somebody's in the background. I wonder who's got their mic on. Who is it?
No one that I can tell.
Okay.
There, Mike, just make sure your doors are shut.
Okay.
It's the Township of Severn one that's making the noise.
Yeah, it's our staff. I'll go look, see what's happening.
Okay.
Sounds like the front desk.
It's the front desk.
Okay. So at the Township of Severn, we recognize the following land acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather and which the Township of Severn operates is part of the particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Ojibwe or Chippewas peoples. This territory is covered by the Lake Simcoe Treaty 16 and the J. Collins land purchase. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. And I think we're not singing O Canada, Madam Clerk?
We will be. We just give David a moment here.
Okay, thank you. We'll sing O Canada, please. Thank you. Now we'll have a moment of reflection, please. Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, no public meetings or hearings, presentation. Anything on the consent agenda that members of council would like pulled? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, do you have a motion?
I do. The motion reads that the regular agenda be adopted as circulated.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Jansen, second by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to I, reports from officials, corporate services. Nancy from Watson and Associates, Development Charges, Informational Workshop. Good morning, Nancy. Welcome.
Good morning. I am going to share my screen here, so just give me a second. Do I have, Allison, do I have the ability to share?
Yes.
Okay. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Yes.
We are.
Okay, that's great. So good morning, everyone. I am going to step you through a little background regarding the development charge background study and proposed bylaw that will be made public this Friday to ensure we start the public process that's required under the Development Charges Act to get a new bylaw in place prior to your existing bylaw expiring. The purpose of today is to bring you up to speed. There has been quite a few changes in the legislation since your last DC study was adopted and the bylaw was passed in 2019. So we want you to understand some of those changes that have taken place. Prior to your consideration of the bylaw, there is a minimum 2 weeks that has to be available between when we release the background study and when you hold your formal public meeting. There also is a 60-day circulation period between when we release the study and when you can consider passage of the new bylaw. All of those dates will be met with the release of the study this Friday. As an overview and reminder for those who have been through this before, development charges really allows municipalities to collect capital costs associated with growth for both residential and non-residential growth that's anticipated in the municipality over a period of time. That capital cost is incremental over and above what your existing infrastructure is today. So it's not replacement, that's asset management. It is to expand and upgrade various infrastructure for different services to allow more growth to come to Severn. There is an established practice that has been in place now since 1989 in Ontario, where to the extent the Development Charges Act allows, municipalities are empowered to recover the growth costs, specifically for the growth to help mitigate what would otherwise have to be paid for through property taxes, water, wastewater rates, and other municipal means. The capital costs that we include in the development charge study are costs that are in addition to what a developer would do as what we call a local service. So if you think of a subdivision, developers are required to put internal roads, sidewalks, street lights, the storm sewers, maybe some stormwater management ponds, as well as some of the smaller water and wastewater linear pipes, if those services are going to be offered, and provide a base level of development to parks that are going to be dedicated to the municipality. Those are very localized works that the developer is still responsible for. What goes into the development charge are broader based benefiting projects that benefit multiple developments throughout the township. The key components of the study are to first undertake a review and update of the growth forecast to identify the amount, type, and location of growth that's anticipated. We then review with staff the local service policy that does form an appendix to the background study to ensure that wherever things need to be refined, or if there's legislative changes where we need to add things, remove things, that gets undertaken for a full review to ensure that we are not putting into the development charge anything that would be considered a local service cost. We then have to undertake a mathematical calculation based on the historical service level that you have provided. That sets an upper limit as to what we can include moving forward, and we'll get into what some of those calculations have produced further in the presentation. We then look at what services you provide and where there is an increased need to service growth. And from that increased need, working with your staff and outside engineers that are working on servicing strategies, for example, for water and wastewater, we come up with a list of capital projects that we believe at this point is the best fit to meet that increased need for service. The capital costs are then reviewed. There's deductions required to them to come up to the net cost that we then use to calculate the DCs. We then draft the bylaw and the background study and put it out publicly for review with the public. As a note to what the timelines have been for this study, we did start last fall going through discussions with staff and engineering, your engineers. We are here today to have a council workshop to bring you up to speed on where things are at. And as I mentioned, this Friday, we'll be releasing the background study publicly. That formal public meeting we have scheduled for your August 14th council meeting date, and we are anticipating bylaw passage by August 28th. Just to note that on September 5th, your current bylaw does expire. So if you do not pass something prior to that, you will not be able to continue to collect development charges as of that date. As noted early on, there has been a significant change to the Development Charges Act. The Act has been around since 1989. Prior to that, municipalities could collect capital contributions called lot levies at the time a lot was created through the Planning Act. In 1989, when the first act was put in place, it really allowed municipalities to recover 100% of their growth-related needs from growth. In 1997, there was a major overhaul of the Act that introduced mandatory reductions, exemptions. It made some services ineligible for inclusion and really took municipalities down to somewhere between 75 and 85% recovery on average, depending on what services you were trying to recover for, where you had growth pressures. Since that time in 1997, you can see on the right, we have had 10 changes to the Development Charges Act, the most recent of which just received royal assent on June 6th, a few weeks ago. And some of the changes have further reduced what municipalities can recover from growth. It has introduced a number of different changes to the timing of payment, the timing of calculating when what rate is due, as well as limiting additional services and then adding other services back in. We'll get into a few more details on that. But with the most recent change, it actually added back in a few things. So it was good news for development charges for municipalities. It also removed a mandatory phase-in that was going to be in place. So the latest one was good news for municipalities, as I mentioned, but a lot of the other changes did further reduce what you can recover from growth. This slide really just gives you the long names of each of those pieces of legislation that have changed over the last 5 years since your bylaw was put in place. Some of the notable changes include, as I was mentioning, the historical service standard calculations. The Act used to say you cannot impose a charge for anything more than what you have provided to your existing community on average over the last 10 years. That has now been extended, and we have to do that averaging over the past 15 years. In some instances, that has helped some municipalities who have been growing rapidly and being able to stay pace with growth, putting infrastructure in place. However, if you have lagged in any of your services putting infrastructure in place, it can actually reduce the amount that you can recover going forward, because as your population increases, if you're not putting infrastructure in place, that averaging over the last 15 year actually shrinks. So that has limited some municipalities. Rental and institutional developments no longer pay their development charges at the time of building permit issuance. They pay in 6 equal installments, with the first installment being due at the time of occupancy, not building permit. So there's a bit of a delay there. The first installment is due then, and then for the next 5 years, on the anniversary date of that installment payment or of that occupancy permit, is when you get the balance. So it has delayed for those types of developments how soon you get the funding. As well for developments that are proceeding through site plan or rezoning application, the rate that was in effect on the day they applied is frozen. Now, there's been a slight change recently with the latest change. So if you had applied for, if someone had applied for a site plan or zoning bylaw amendment, somewhere between January 1st, 2020 and June 5th, 2024, and they had received approval for that application, their rate is frozen for 2 years from the date of approval until they pull their building permit, and they would pay the rate that was in effect on the day that they actually applied for the DC. For any of those applications that did not receive approval before the June 6th new legislative timeframe, then their freeze time frame is reduced from 2 years to 18 months. But it's still a delay on when you can collect the money and how much you can collect it for. Now, with the installment payments and that rate freeze, the Act does allow you to impose interest on those rates or installment payments at a maximum prescribed rate of the average of the 5 big banks' prime rate plus 1%. That right now is certainly not in line with the inflation rate that is used for development charges. So over time, there will be a little bit less that you'll be collecting for that as well. There is also requirements for notice of the public meeting and notice of bylaw passage that's required through the Act. And the most recent change has modernized that notice for municipalities that do not have a newspaper of general circulation. And it will allow you to post those notices on your municipal website instead of doing a mass mail out to every property. However, the Act, although the Act has been changed, this requirement is actually contained within the regulations to the Act, and the regulation has not yet been embraced, but we understand that can happen any day now. There are additional exemptions that have been put in place, and these actually override your current bylaw as well as will be contained in your new bylaw. But those include the exemption for additional residential units. So you now can have up to 3 units on a property, and you can only impose, if it's a brand new unit, the development charge on the first unit. If I have an existing unit, I can add 2 additional units without having to pay the development charge. Now, those units can be in my current home, such as an apartment or a basement apartment or an apartment over my garage, or it could be ancillary to the development. So it could be a garden suite or granny flat or tiny home if those things are allowed through the zoning. There are now statutory exemptions for affordable and attainable housing. That became effective June 1st of this year. And the ministry released a bulletin that provides thresholds for municipalities to measure against as to what that rate would be for a home to be sold below to be considered affordable, or what the monthly rent would be for a rental unit to be considered affordable. That bulletin will be updated annually by the ministry and released so that you will always have that information available to measure against. It is the lesser of two tests, one being an average income-based test for you, and that is an average income for Severn households, or the average, or 90% of the average purchase price, which varies by type of unit, single detached, semi-detached, townhouse, or apartment. And then similarly, there is also the income-based test for rental housing, or the average monthly rent in the township for various types of units based on the number of bedrooms. So that actually overrode your current bylaw and is currently in place. However, if a development comes forward and claims they are providing affordable housing, they do have to enter into an agreement with the municipality to ensure that those units stay affordable for a minimum of 25 years. The attainable units, although that is in effect, we are still waiting for further regulation to define it a bit more. Right now, all it is defined is that it's not affordable housing and it's not rental housing. But we don't know how to measure against what that is. So we're still expecting a refinement to that, which again could happen at any day. There is a full statutory exemption for nonprofit housing, as well as affordable housing if it is defined differently than the province's affordable residential units, if it's contained within an inclusionary zoning bylaw. There's also a statutory exemption for universities receiving ongoing funding from the province of Ontario. And that could be a small satellite campus as well as a major full campus. That exemption actually does not, you will not find it in the Development Charges Act. It actually was put in place through the Training Universities and Colleges Act, but it is exempt now as well. Further, on the rental housing, if there is rental housing built, and rental housing is defined as a development with 4 or more units, all of which are for rental purposes, they would get a discount to the development charges based on the number of bedrooms that are contained within each unit. So for units that have 3 or more bedrooms, they would get a 25% discount off the rate. For 2-bedroom units, they get a 20% discount. And for 1-bedroom and bachelor, they get a 15% discount. This new bylaw can have a life up to 10 years. Previously, bylaws were only allowed to have a maximum life of 5 years. So we will be putting in place a 10-year bylaw. However, if there are significant changes to any of the services contained, that does not stop you from coming back earlier than that 10 years to do an update for all or some of the services if required. There is now also a requirement for municipalities to spend or allocate a minimum of 60% of the opening balance of the development charge reserve funds for the components that relate to water, wastewater, or services related to a highway, which is your roads and related component of the charges. Just to note, that rule also applies for any cash in lieu of parkland funding that you may be collecting for. And that's through the Planning Act that was put in place. There are also additional requirements related to the annual DC Reserve Fund Treasurer's Statement, and a requirement to ensure that the statements are posted to your website, and that each year is there for the number of years that your bylaw is in place. So with this new bylaw, eventually you will have 10 years worth of statements required to be kept on your website, along with the bylaw, the background study, and any other relevant information regarding the development charges. The services that we have included this time around in what our review has includes water and wastewater. They have been in previous development charge studies on an area-specific basis for West Shore, Coldwater, and Severn Estates. Just to note, Severn Estates is fully built out now, and that charge will not, there won't be a charge going forward for that one now for water and sewer. But there are still water and sewer area-specific charges for West Shore and Coldwater. The services related to a highway, fire protection, library, and parks and recreation. Again, those have been included in prior development charge bylaws of yours and will continue to. The additional new service this year that has been embraced is the Provincial Offences Act, because it includes expansionary needs for bylaw enforcement. So that's a new component of the charge that will be added this time around. Your growth forecast that we are looking at varies depending on the service. Some services are looking out over a longer period of time than others. We do have a 10-year forecast with a net population increase of just over 1,500 people. They will be contained within approximately 800 units. And then on the non-residential side of things, we're anticipating in the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector, an additional 206,400 square feet of new building spaces. Most of the services are being calculated over that 10-year period. The Parks and Rec, the library, that Provincial Offences Act, as well as your growth-related studies. For the services related to highway and fire protection, we're looking out over a longer period of time, 13 years, which sees the net population increase go up to 1,800 from that 1,500, within just over 950 homes. And on the non-residential side, 248,100 square feet will be in place at that point. For water and wastewater, we look at urban build-out timeframes. And so for the West Shore area, we are looking at a net population increase of 2,700 people in just under 1,100 units and 307,800 square feet of space. In Coldwater, there's upwards of 1,960 additional people in 761 residential units with almost 210,000 square feet of space. The difference between the full urban build-out and the West Shore and Coldwater area include other developments that will take place in what is considered right now the rural area. Some of those areas may be determined at some point to require water and wastewater servicing to be put in place by the developers, by the municipality, and or be somehow connected to another service in a neighboring municipality. That has yet to be determined at this point, but may require a future area-specific development charge to be put in place in the years to come once that servicing is sorted out. As mentioned, the local service policy we have reviewed with staff and refined. What we've really done is just clarify what you have been doing in practice in what you've been requiring your developers to put in place as part of their development. The Act years ago put in a no additional levies clause, which states that you cannot require a developer to pay for or construct any works that aren't identified in the development charge as either a local service component or something that is included in the calculations. And if they were to do it on your behalf, they would get a credit back through the collections of the development charges if they were putting that work in place up front. The services that we need those general guidelines around include water, wastewater, stormwater, the services related to a highway for those roads and related, as well as that base level of development for parkland. The other services are not required to be put in place by the developers and therefore aren't included in the local service policy. As mentioned, we have to undertake those mathematical calculations for the historical service standard. We do have to look at both quantity and quality measures. Quantity measures may be the kilometers of roadways, the square footage of facilities, the number of vehicles and equipment you have, acres of parkland, the number of amenities in those parks, such as ball diamonds, soccer fields, etc. And then your collection items for library services. We have calculated for each service based on all of that, the maximum amount that you can include. So for that roads and related component, the maximum you could include in the calculations is upwards of $53.8 million. You can see that based on what we are planning to include in the calculations, we are just under 12.6 million of that 53.8 million. For fire protection, we have included almost all of the costs that are eligible at just over 1.8 million. As well, for Parks and Rec, we plan on using the full maximum allowable amount of just over 3.4 million. As well, for library services, just over 500,000 is allowed and will be included based on the growth needs. And as well, for that bylaw enforcement component, we will be including almost everything that we are allowed, which is very minor at just over $9,800. So that's what will be coming forward in the calculations that we're just finalizing with staff, and will be embraced in the report on Friday. Some general observations on the service standards as well as the capital. There have been those replacement values or capital project values have significantly increased due to inflation. Some of those inflationary impacts are due to COVID, supply chain issues, some of which are still being felt by some municipalities. As well, there is a lot of infrastructure to be put in place throughout the province, both by municipal governments, provincial governments, the federal government, and the private sector. And there is a shortage of tradespeople in the construction industry right now, and that is driving up prices as well. Probably not a surprise to you with any tenders you've recently gone out to issue that they are coming in quite high. The development charge itself gets indexed annually to try and stay pace with inflation, and that is based on a non-residential construction price index that Stats Canada tracks based on tender prices in the province. And over the last 5 years, that has increased by about 45%. So a significant increase. Again, that's reflective of the replacement values in those historical service standard calculations, as well as the costing that is being included for the capital program that'll be in the calculations going forward. As mentioned, the historical service standard calculations being extended over the 15 years has limited some services where it hasn't affected other services to the extent, such as your roads, where you have quite a significant amount in place, but not as much need to expand going forward to meet that. For water, wastewater, and stormwater services, we do not have to undertake these historical service standard calculations because there is other legislation in place that requires municipalities to build those services at current ministry standards. So we're not limited for those services based on this type of calculation as we are for any of the other services. The capital program, again, we are looking at water and wastewater services over that urban build out. That urban build out is really based on the capacity at the plants. For West Shore and Coldwater, with expansionary needs for the wastewater treatment plants, that's really our cap. Water will allow for even more growth. Outside of what the wastewater treatment capacity will allow for. So at some point in the future, there will be even more additional expansionary needs to the wastewater treatment plants if you want to grow more than what we've included based on build out of the wastewater treatment plants. The services related to a highway and fire, as mentioned, we're looking out between 24 and 2036 for a forecast period, and all other services are limited to that 10-year forecast period because that is the capital that we are aware of to service 10 years worth of growth. What that looks like in total, there has been over $161 million worth of projects identified. As noted, some of those projects have a benefit in excess of the forecast periods that we're looking at. That post-period deduction, about 14% of the overall costs, or almost $23 million, those costs will get added in future development charges as more growth gets added in. Keep in mind that the capital costs are our numerator in our calculation, and the growth is the denominator in the calculation. So as we bring in more growth, we will bring in more of those costs associated with that growth to include in future calculations. There's also some other deductions that are required for some services based on limitations of the maximum historic service standard. Some growth studies pertain not just to eligible DC services, but to some that are ineligible. So we've had to make some deductions there. And then we also have a benefit to existing component that is quite large. But what that really embraces is where you are replacing and upgrading or replacing and expanding existing infrastructure. The replacement component is your asset management. We cannot charge replacement of existing to growth. We are only looking at including that incremental additional cost associated with growth in for the recovery through development charges. So at the moment, there's just over $96.5 million that are going to be embraced in the calculations, with almost 81 million of that being associated with the residential growth and about 15.6 million that's associated with the non-residential growth that's anticipated. There are, as I mentioned, a lot of new statutory requirements. We are embracing those, as well as other ones that have been in place for years and are already in your current bylaw. So the statutory policies that we have to embrace is the continuation of the industrial expansion exemption. So if I have a 5,000 square foot building today, I can add 2,500 square feet and you can't impose the charge on me. Any square footage I add over and above that 2,500 square feet or 50% of my existing building, you would impose the charge on. The residential intensification, allowing for those additional units. I can expand my house as well without having to pay a charge. You do not charge the county if they build a new facility in Severn, nor do you charge the school boards if they build a new school whether that's elementary or secondary. And the school boards in the county that have their development charges, if you were building, say, a new rec center or fire station, public works facility, they would not impose their development charges on your buildings either. So there's a local government exemption that's in place. As mentioned, the additional residential units that even may be ancillary to the existing unit or new unit are exempt. The affordable and attainable housing, the nonprofit housing, the universities, the rate freeze is in place for site plan and rezoning applications, as well as the installment payments for rental and institutional development charges. So all of that will be embraced in the new proposed bylaw that we'll be putting out with the study on Friday. In addition to those statutory requirements, every municipality has the ability to further provide partial or full exemptions, discounts. They may phase in the charge if it's increasing. That's really up to each individual municipality. In the past, you have exempted the portion of worship for a place of worship. We're anticipating that to continue on. You've also exempted the non-residential farm buildings that are for bona fide farming purposes. That again, we are embracing in the new proposed bylaw. But that is all the discretionary exemptions that you currently have. So what we do want to hear from you is whether or not you want us to include any additional policies, discretionary policies, in this proposed bylaw before it goes public on Friday. If you have, concerns about a certain type or class of development that you are trying to encourage, that can be put in place. However, the Act does require you to ensure that anything within that class or type of development are treated equally. So a type of development is a place of worship. A class of development could be commercial or industrial. So as long as anything that falls into those categories are treated equally, you can choose to put other policies in place. For next steps, we do need to finalize the development charge calculations. We're 99% there. Staff are just reviewing those final numbers, and then we will be releasing the background study and draft bylaw on Friday, as mentioned. Again, the public meeting is scheduled for August 14th. There will need to be a minimum of 3 weeks notice prior to that of the public meeting. And then we'll be back for your consideration of the bylaw on August 28th with an anticipated effective date of September 5th, the same day in which your current bylaw is expiring. That is my presentation for today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Thank you, Nancy. Great presentation. Lots of information there. Do any members of council have questions? And I can't see everyone. I'm sorry. Your hand is up.
Should we take down the?
Can we take down the presentation, please? Councillor Minnings.
Hi, thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Neale, I agree. It was a great presentation. Thank you very much for all that information. My question is, when you were speaking on slide 8, it was regarding historical levels of service calculation that was being extended to the new 15-year period. You had said that it has benefited some municipalities, but not others. And I'm wondering, where does Severn stand in that? Thank you.
Yeah, through the mayor, you have been limited further on some of the services, such as parks and recreation. for example, with you can see with the amount that's required for roads, you're not limited, but most of the other services, you're limited by that historic service standard calculation. So you do have more capital needs than what we can include. And that's where, for example, on slide, let me just get it quickly, the one with the capital costs on it, for the Provincial Offences Act, including bylaw, for example, your needs exceed that maximum service standard. And so we've had to do a deduction for over $29,000 just for that service, because the historic service standard doesn't allow you to recover the full cost of what your needs are. So we've had to do a deduction there that will have to be funded from other sources, such as property taxes.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Minnings?
Yeah, so thank you. So that was my my worry that we didn't stand favorably, sort of financially speaking. And I'm not sure how that's going to affect us going forward. So, for example, we've been talking about building the West Shore Recreation Center, and some of the conversation, I believe, and the township director of finance can correct me if I'm wrong, were from development charges. So I'm just concerned about costs and where council will be able to see all of that come together, as far as where we might be at risk for having to go to other sources, as you said, for funding of projects and other things.
Yeah, through the mayor, we do have the community center in West Shore included in the calculations. That facility, there's growth-related debt on, and we have included principal and interest costs for that community center. That community center does have a benefit to more than the 10 years worth of growth we're embracing in the calculation for parks and recreation services. And therefore, that post-period benefit deduction is still growth related and will be picked up in future development charges. So that facility itself will be recoverable through development charges over a number of years, but more than just the next 10 years. So it becomes a cash flow issue for the municipality, which is why debt has been issued for it, or will be issued for it, to ensure that you can recover it over a longer period of time.
Thank you. And for my last question pertaining to your expertise on this subject, so because we are, you called it growth-related debt, so we're borrowing money and paying it back with future development charges, we're going to be collecting it into however many years in the future. Is that sort of the risk to the township, financially speaking? Is that the cost of doing business? I'm just wondering if that's sustainable, because we haven't started the West Shore Recreation Center, and we are talking about debt from a source where the incoming developmental charges are being significantly reduced. So I'd just like you to speak to that, and it may just be an opinion.
I think we'll have Mr. Plunkett. Can we have Mr. Plunkett weigh in, Nancy, just before? And Andrew, if you could, for the benefit of all the council, is that we have started already with and explained to Councillor Minnings what if you have it off the top of your head, what we've spent to date preparing the site and how we arrived at the site. So there's a little bit of a history behind it as well. Please.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can respond, I will quickly just respond. The debt that we are effectively borrowing, we're actually borrowing from ourselves because we can cash flow this ourselves, and we'll actually be able to recover the interest back to our own reserves as we continue to, because we will end up paying for this facility before we finish collecting all the DCs that will come in. So they will continue to come in after, but we will be funding it ourselves. We should not need to go out and obtain any debt from outside sources. But as far as the facility so far, and the Director of Public Works can probably jump in on this, but we've spent approximately about $2 million to date. We've also collected in the area of about $2 million in DC charges to date as well. So right now I would argue we are sustaining that, but certainly as the project goes forward, we will have to expend the money in advance.
And Nancy, if you'd like to add anything, please.
Yeah, just further to what Andrew said there, he's right. The amount that has been collected, this project has been in your prior development charge studies for a number of years now. So you have been collecting towards it to help pay those internal loans back. But just to note, the interest that you're paying back on that gets to be added to the development charge over and above that maximum historical 15-year service standard. So the principal has to be captured within that 15 years, but the interest is in addition to it.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the mayor to Nancy, excellent report. Two things. You mentioned something about having to pay back 60%. That's one of the new regs that came from the province. Can you explain that one to me? What do we have to pay the 60%?
So the 60% pertains to your water, wastewater, and stormwater development charge reserve funds. You don't have to pay them back. What you have to ensure is that annually through your budget, you are allocating a minimum of 60% of the opening balance. So if you were to have $1 million in your West Shore wastewater reserve fund, then you would have to ensure that 600,000 of that was being allocated to projects for that year. Now, you don't have to necessarily spend all of that 60%. Some years it may be more or less, but what the province wants to see is that municipalities are actually assigning those funds, because those are the three services that have the majority of funding through development charges in them across the province. And they want to see that you are planning to spend that funding. Now, those projects, they tend to be very large and take multiple years as well, from design, land purchases that may be needed, number of years of construction. So some large projects can span, 3 to 7 years on average. But what they want to see is that you are planning to spend those funds each year. And why it says spend or allocate is they recognize that with multi-year jobs, you won't necessarily be able to spend the full 60% in any one given year. So it's just making sure that you're budgeting for those projects to take place for those three reserve funds. Now, any other reserve fund at the moment is not prescribed to follow those rules, but the province could change that and require other DC services to have a similar allocation or spend each year going forward as well. But right now, it's just those three services.
Thank you. And just a second question. We've been approached in the past, and then other municipalities are doing it, reducing development charges like for commercial properties. And we've been reminded by Mr. Plunkett that it's not a good idea. But what's the rationale with neighboring municipalities making it attractive to lower the price to the consumer, not having to pay the full DC charges?
Yeah, every municipality has their own concerns, often with employment. It's, they feel that attracting that type of employment, whether it be commercial or industrial, would help to generate growth on the residential side as well. quite often commercial and institutional, usually follows population. As people come, you need more institutional buildings, you need more commercial buildings. Industrial is a little bit different because industrial developments tend to look at things, they don't necessarily just come as the population grows. They look at access to highways and their market, land costs, because they tend to pay a higher property tax rate. They look at ongoing annual property taxes, as well as a number of other issues, including labor force. So they're not looking necessarily where the people are, they're looking at where the skilled people are that can, actually be employed in the area, in their business. So industrial is a little bit differently, and some municipalities where they don't have a lot of industrial employment look to further reduce or exempt those types of developments. Some municipalities where they have downtown cores that are struggling look to reduce or discount for commercial to try and revitalize those downtowns. So really, there's a number of different reasons that municipalities make decisions that they do, and that is on an individual basis. However, it has to be understood that whether it's a statutory or non-statutory exemption or discount that you provide, any amount you can't collect from a certain type or class of growth cannot be charged to other classes or types of growth, and therefore has to be made up from other municipal funding sources, which typically is your water wastewater rates for those services or your property taxes.
Thank you very much. That's pretty much what Mr. Plunkett reminds us of.
So Nancy, that would have to be on the levy, correct? If that would be one option. So if we wanted to forgive commercial or industrial, the taxpayer would have to brunt or make up the difference, correct? Is that how it would work?
That's correct, because ultimately, when you undertake any of these projects, if you aren't collecting the money through development charges, you don't get to a reduced cost on your project unless you're cutting the service or building something less. What ends up happening is you have to fund it from some other source, and that's typically through the property taxes, unless you can get some other type of grant or funding from other sources.
Thank you. Madam CEO, did you want to weigh in before?
I did. Thank you. I thought that was a great question and a great answer by Nancy. And it will become a good discussion when council actually sees the rates, because I think Nancy was sort of softly warming you up to the idea that the rates are going to be high. So then council will have to decide where you want to collect from growth or where you want to put it on the backs of the taxpayer. So I think that was a really great segue for something that's going to come, and that I think it's going to be a big council discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I can't hear him.
No, your mic is off, Councillor Brennan. Turn your mic on. There you go.
I'm getting an echo. Thank you. How am I now? Good?
Much better.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, I have a question on your slide 9. It's on slide 9. You're referring to rental housing is defined as 4 or more units, and it was bullet 5, as I believe. There was different discount rates noted for like 3, for 4 or more units, 3 and 2, and then in one of them, the last bullet, instead of saying 1 or saying bachelor, it said all other units. What is all other units? What is that definition?
Yeah, through the mayor. All of that is the definition in the Development Charges Act. But truly, if you've got a discount for 3 or more bedrooms, a discount for 2 bedroom, All other units are really one bedroom and bachelor apartments or those type of units that would be, it could be in a, what do they refer to them as? Units that have, that are like a loft apartment that are open. So it doesn't necessarily have specific bedrooms to them, and it's more open concept type of a unit as well. But it's basically a one bedroom or bachelor that fall in there.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Brennan? Councillor Brennan, does that answer your question?
Can he hear us?
I don't think he can.
You're on mute.
I think
He's on mute because he's using the speaker system through Chambers.
but I don't
That's
think
sorry.
I'm not sure if he can hear us. Can you hear us?
Sorry, there. We're just having an issue in the council chamber.
Okay.
I'm working on it.
Thank you. Maybe while we're waiting for David to fix it, Councillor Jansen, did you want to ask Nancy a question?
Thank you. And through the chair to Ms. Neale, I just want to clarify what build out means. Does that, or the definition, I guess. So we say on slide 12, we show urban build out 2024 to build out. Is that to build or to use up the existing settlement lands?
No, through the mayor. As I mentioned, what we've tied the build out to right now is the wastewater capacity for West Shore and Coldwater once the expansion to those plants that are anticipating is fully used up. Unfortunately, the expansions required to the water treatment facilities will allow for more expansion, but there won't be enough wastewater expansion. So we have tied both of those to the wastewater plant build-outs.
Okay, and supplemental. So do we know those timelines, or that's it's kind of to be determined based on the amount of growth that takes place?
That's correct. We're not tied to any specific year. We assume it'll be post 2036, but whether that is 2038 or 2058 is unknown. It really depends on the amount of take up in each of those two areas that will be connecting to those systems.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Can you hear us, Councillor Brennan, now? Okay, now did you hear the answer from Nancy, or would you like her to repeat what you asked? Just talk into your microphone, Councillor Brennan. Turn your microphone on and talk into the...
Yes, thank you, through the mayor. No, I did not hear the answer to that question. If you would, please.
I think you were talking about the lofts in this.
Yeah, through the mayor. The Development Charges Act actually defines the 3-bedroom or more discount, the 2-bedroom discount, and then it actually says, and all other bedroom quantities, which typically is a 1-bedroom or bachelor type unit. It could be a loft apartment, for example, that is very open concept so that it doesn't have any specific bedroom walls. So that is the types of units that would fall into that 15% reduction to the charge.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cox.
Yeah, first of all, my question was about the new addition, the POA. So that will be our bylaw enforcement department now we're going to have on? Okay.
Yeah. Through the mayor, we're looking at staff are predicting that over the next 10 years, you will need to add an additional vehicle for bylaw enforcement, as well as additional equipment and gear for an additional bylaw enforcement officer. And it's specific to that vehicle and equipment and gear for an additional enforcement officer that staff feel that as the municipality grows will be required.
Okay, thank you. The other one, when you mentioned the parkland development, and I think you said something
So do I
But
use this for questions?
if the developer gives money to parkland development or a recreation facility, that we would give back part of the DC charges that they paid? Or did I hear that wrong?
Yeah, no, there's the local service requirement that they will need to do at 100% their costs. So, for example, with parks, before dedication, most municipalities, similar to yourself, don't want just raw land. They want it, cleared, maybe grubbed, seeded or sodded, some base grading to it so that as it's dedicated to you, if it's just rough land, raw land, someone could be out there running around, with their kids or their pet and trip and fall and then sue the municipality. So most municipalities require the developers to do a base amount before they dedicate it. That's their cost.
Okay.
Over and above that, once you have the land, you will develop it further. You may go out and put additional flowers or shrubs or tree plantings, a play structure, a ball diamond, a soccer field, etc., into that park to make it a fully active or passive park, some trails, etc. Some municipalities require or negotiate with their developers to do more than the base level while they're out there already constructing their development, to go further and put in place the full park, usually for parkettes, if that's the case. But development over that base level is being recovered through the development charges. So if a developer was to do that work on your behalf, they would get credit back from development charges for it.
Okay. Okay. Then you talked about on the one slide, we're going to the max.
So what we have included in the calculations for most of the services that we are including, where we have to undertake those calculations, all but roads, we have embraced in the calculations the full amount that we can, based on those historical service standard calculations that set the upper limit of what we can include. Okay. Roads is the only component that the value of your historic is well in excess of what your future needs are for expansion for growth, where the other services you're limited to.
Okay. Okay, so this is a question I need to. So we can do area specific, right?
You can do area specific.
Okay, so an example would have been, we did Division Road. We had a specific DC charge for Division Road. We fixed it. If there was money left in that, does that have to stay there to be utilized for Division Road for the future?
Through the mayor, we typically do not do anything other than water and wastewater on an area specific basis. Yeah. And that's because the transportation system, for example, although certain developments may be triggering an improvement to a road or an expansion to it, the growth within the entire municipality is going to use the transportation system and will benefit from it. So we do the services related to a highway on a municipal-wide basis. There's a number of different projects in different areas, depending on the growth, that need to be upgraded or expanded. And everyone then, all developments, share equally in the cost of all of those. Therefore, you may go forward with Division Road improvements first, and then do another road a few years down the road for another area. But in general, you're collecting the money, and as the projects happen, you're paying for them out of the development charges. So at the end of the day, Andrew will fund the projects that are listed here based on the actual. Okay. We're estimating the costs. All of the costs in here are estimates. Some may come in higher or lower. And then we do a reserve adjustment. So part of the calculations that we do, we look at what was in the DC reserve funds at the end of last year. And if it was in a surplus, we deduct that out of our calculations because we've already collected it from the growth that has taken place, and we don't need to collect that yet again. On the flip side, if you've gone ahead and done some projects, one of those reserve funds may be in a deficit, in which case we add that deficit back in because you've undertaken the work early, but you're collecting it over a longer period of time. And we want to make sure that we include that. So the pluses and minuses are always dealt with through the reserve fund and are adjusted every time you update your calculations. Hopefully that helps.
Yep. And now what I wanted to ask then, area specific, do we have any area specific projects in this DC charge bylaw?
You do, through the mayor. The only thing we have area specific is water and wastewater services for West Shore and Coldwater, as well as for those on septic systems. There's an area specific charge for an expansion for haulage and septage receiving.
That's where I was going. Thank you very much. I wanted to know if that was in there. Thank you, because that will be a future growth issue. So I wanted to ask about that. And just one more thing. Our DC charges in the past have been paying for growth?
To the extent that you can collect the funding. Yes, you have been trying to maximize, and as I mentioned, the discretionary exemptions, you only have 2 right now. So you have been trying in the past to put as much in place as possible. However, understanding now with all this additional statutory exemptions, you will be limited and have to make up that difference from other sources already. And with the amount of new statutory exemptions, we are seeing municipalities phase out or remove some of those discretionary exemptions because they're already being limited with no, recourse based on the statutory requirements. We're also seeing some municipalities that weren't collecting for, say, industrial or commercial development, starting to phase in those charges for the first time because of those statutory exemptions your hands are tied with.
Okay, so this is what I want to clarify. What I want to clarify is this township has done over the years their max they can do with their DCs to ensure that growth pays for growth. It's the province that has set down these statutory ones now that will tend to make us have to find funds from another area. Thank you. That's what I want. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Nancy, just further to Deputy Mayor Cox's comments, I know, and I saw Andrew pop up, but you're telling me, for example, Division Road and the Bass Lake Woodlands in that area collected DCs. And my understanding was the DCs would have funded the new road, but you're telling me because roads are throughout the township, the DCs that were collected for that area now can be utilized anywhere in the township? And Andrew may want to weigh in on this. I saw you come in, Andrew. I'm not sure.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Even though the roads are listed on your DC study, they're not area specific. We just list all of the projects that we do have that have a growth related component. But they, as Nancy mentioned, they can be used interchangeably between the other roadways, that as long as they have growth related components to their new capital costs.
So, Andrew, I think the DCs that were collected for that area, I know we had a surplus. I'm not sure if we still do, but I was led to believe that we could only spend that money in that ward. But you're telling me now we can, if we so choose to spend it on roads throughout the township, we can.
We certainly can, and I'll apologize for if there was any confusion, but certainly on the roads that gets used on all of the roads that are growth related within the municipality. It's never been, even though they're listed on there, they are not an area specific type charge. They are a all encompassing DC charge.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Minnings.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just have a couple quick questions to Ms. Neale. What are the 2 discretionary exemptions that we currently have that you stated?
So they are, through the mayor, they are places of worship, or the portion that is for worship. And we clarified that because a lot of places of worship, a lot of faith-based religions these days have private schools. Those private schools do not fall under the school boards the same way. There's a lot that are also getting into revenue generated facilities like a banquet facility that is rented out. So it's the portion for worship that you exempt. That is probably in 95% of bylaws throughout the province to exempt that. The other is the non-residential farm buildings. So a barn, a silo, that type of or storage facility for bona fide farming purposes, not on-farm diversified uses. So if I am building a machine shop in a barn, or if I'm building a barn or converting a barn to hold weddings and rent that out, that is not a bona fide farming purpose. So those types of developments would not be exempt under your farming definition. It has to be for bona fide farming purposes.
Thank you. So subsequent question is, are development charges just for new builds, or are they also for renovations, additions to existing residential, commercial, industrial projects?
So through the mayor, let's talk about residential first. They have to be for incremental additional units, not a renovation inside. So I could redo my kitchen. I'm not paying a development charge. Residential is based on the additional people that are going to be coming in those units. So that, if it's just a internal renovation, isn't the case. On the non-residential side, again, renovations, no. If you are building new or if you're expanding your current building, it's that incremental additional square footage that is imposed on, except for that mandatory 50% expansion that's allowed to an industrial building before you then charge over and above that.
Okay, thank you very much. You answered my next question with that one answer too, so thanks.
Okay.
Nancy, just to, if I could just get clarity on Councillor Minning's questions, the place of worship and the farm buildings, is that in the act mandated by the province, or is that something that municipalities have taken on by themselves? And if so, where do we make up the difference for the development charges, if that's the case?
Yeah, you're right. No, it's not. Those are not mandated by the act. Those are a discretionary policy that you have had in place for years, similar to most municipalities. And yes, if those types of developments come forward and you cannot collect the development charge, those funds have to be made up from other sources.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brennan.
I think, yeah, Brennan, I was going to say, I keep seeing Councillor Brennan raise a note there.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, here we go again.
Put your mic on, Councillor Brennan. If you put your mic on, use your mic. Yes. Oh, you're on mute now. You're on mute. Nope, still on mute.
Now?
Yes.
I'm still getting an echo. All right, came in on this echo today. I don't know what's going on.
Eat that one.
Yeah.
No, we can't hear you.
No, we can't
No,
hear you.
we can't hear again.
Take it off mute.
There we are. We can hear you now.
Hello?
Try it
Nope.
now.
No, you're on mute. Still on mute.
Hello?
There we
There
go.
you are.
Oh, just
No, your computer's on mute now.
Oh, you're still on mute.
Jim's working?
Councillor McIntyre, can you?
Can you hear us?
No, he can't hear.
Testing.
Jim, can you hear us?
No.
No.
There appears to be an issue in chambers with the computer that connects the audio through to the feed.
Okay.
It's what impacted Councillor Jansen's audio last week too, with us hearing in chambers.
Okay.
So we will make sure it's
If he wants
100%
to
fixed
come in
during
and
the
use
summer
my-
recess.
Hang on.
So
Maybe have Councillor Brennan come into your office or where you are, Deputy Mayor Cox, to speak. That's okay.
My technology experience. There you go, right there.
Is it on now?
You can sit there, that's right.
Thank you.
Now we can hear you.
I don't know what it is. Hello. Yeah, I wanted to follow up through the mayor to Ms. Neale. I wanted to follow up on the deputy mayor's comments around growth paying for growth. In your earlier comments, in 1997, you noted that changes were made that reduced our ability to collect fees to 75 to 85% of the actual cost as determined by whatever, I'm not sure. So we've also got now new restrictions placed on the various bills in the last few years. So is it not fair to say that we are actually recovering probably around 2/3 of the cost now, not 75, not 85% of the costs of growth? In other words, the resident taxpayer is paying a substantial sum now for having new buildings put in to Severn Township.
Through the mayor, yes, that's fair. And the exact amount will differ depending on the types of developments that you get. If you get a lot of affordable housing, for example, that is mandatorily exempt, that can reduce you more than another municipality. So with all of these additional statutory exemptions, it's just not fully known what the full impact will be. However, staff will be tracking that information over time, because the province has said that they will be providing some funding that municipalities can tap into to help make up for some of those losses. How much you might be successful in getting that over another municipality, considering everyone will be trying to tap into those funds, is also unknown at this point. But staff will be tracking those exemptions so that if any funding becomes available, they will, be able to apply for that as quickly as possible to try and get an additional amount that will save then you having to put more of those costs on the property taxes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Councillor McIntyre, let's see if yours works.
No.
No, I think you'll have to go into where Judith is, Jim. Still can't hear you.
May I just to follow up on what Councillor Brennan said? I think he was talking, Nancy, that it wasn't just the fact that the mandatory are coming in. In the past, we were already subsidizing growth. The existing residents were. And I'm sure that happens in every municipality, does it not? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, thank you.
It just got worse.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, dear.
Just go, yeah.
Yep.
Can you hear me now?
We
Yep.
can.
Okay, just a quick question through the mayor back to Nancy made a comment earlier regarding, or I guess it's under the statutory DC. something about the discounts, 25%, 15% along the way. I'm just asking a simple question. If I'm a developer, a builder, and I build a new home subdivision, is it possible under the way I'm trying to interpret this, Nancy, is it possible for someone to build a new building with a garden suite in the back, taking advantage of these discounts, and a basement apartment, therefore circumventing just a single family residence? We're now having a building with a garden suite and an apartment in the lower level. Does that not take away from us some of the from township some of the DC charges?
Through the mayor, yes. If I was building a new home, and at that time, I was also applying for my permit for a garden suite and for a basement apartment, the only development charge you could impose on me is for a single family home, that first unit. You would not be also able to impose an apartment rate for the basement apartment or a multiple rate for that garden suite, which you previously would have been able to do.
Through the mayor, does that not then give huge discounts to a developer with the plan that so therefore, is it safe to assume that all the developers in our township who are coming, who have a notion to sell single family residential, would apply for that at the time? So therefore, down the road, they could activate the basement apartment, activate the garden suite?
Through the mayor, I mean, it is a possibility. Certainly in municipalities that have universities and colleges, they're seeing it a lot more, where the purpose-built, basement apartment, and it does have to be a legal apartment with a different address, and that will be put in place. What we are also seeing in other municipalities, similar to yourself, is those garden suites going in more for multi-generational housing. The kids can't afford to move out and get their own house, so they're building a garden suite so they have some autonomy, or people are bringing their elderly parents into those type of units so they still have some of their own space, but their family is closer to them if they need them. And yes, they are now mandatorily exempt. That's part of the province's push to build more homes and more affordable homes, is to provide those reductions. And it in turn means that municipalities are forced with making up the difference from the loss in DC revenue.
So a supplemental question through the mayor. So therefore, falling back on the municipality, Severn Township, we're now going to have the taxing of our schools, our roads, and so on, because there's more people living in a smaller community. Parking problems will arise from garden suites and basement apartments. Therefore, parking is you won't be able to get up and down your road, for instance. So this will then fall back on the municipality, as I would understand it then from your clarity.
Through the mayor, yes, unless you can tap into some of those funds that are going to be made available by the province to make up some of that difference, yes, it will fall back onto the municipality and your ratepayers.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Great. Okay. Any further questions? Did you want to say anything, Mr. Plunkett?
If I can, Mr. Mayor, through to Member McIntyre. I would also suggest, though, that if those types of units were built, they would actually increase the assessments. So we would end up collecting more tax dollars to help alleviate some of that problem.
Well, that is good to know. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Madam CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. If you're done, I just wanted to say thank you to Nancy. It's a really, really complex topic, and staff were connecting with me while we were listening about how clearly you articulated it. Yeah. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions from council? Deputy Mayor Cox.
I have to agree. I've listened to many DC reports over the years, and you made this very people easy. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I just want to echo the same things, Nancy. Well done. Very easy to read, and explanations were great. And if we could talk to your boss, unless you're the boss, we'd like to give you a raise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, do you have a motion?
I do, thank you. The motion reads that the workshop presentation by Nancy Neale from Watsons and Associates regarding development charges and informational workshop be received for information.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Minning, second by Councillor Brennan. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very
Your
much.
worship, just before we move on to the next item, we were wondering two things. One, if we can have a quick bio break before we
Yes,
get into all the planning reports and particularly the official plan discussion, because I expect that might take some time.
Yep.
And two, because the technical difficulties we've had at this meeting and the last meeting, and I know council has reviewed member Minning's request earlier this year, I will be bringing a report forward to August, one of the August 2 meetings, to actually bring council back in on a hybrid basis. It would alleviate much of the technical issues that we are encountering. And we do have members of the public that are starting to attend these meetings in chambers. And it is confusing from an accountability transparency perspective that we are continuing to conduct our business this way. So I'll be bringing a report forward. It'll have to be a request for reconsideration at that point in time. But a discussion for a different day. But I did want to say that we have encountered and hopefully don't have any more technical issues today. But it is because we're trying to accommodate folks trying to watch in chambers while we're trying to do a completely virtual meeting. So we're definitely encountering a bit of a pinch point there that we're going to have to deal with, but that won't be till August. So with that said, if we can have a bio break, that'd be lovely.
Great. Thank you. 5-minute bio break, everyone. Thank you. We'll commence again and we'll move on to 1.21, planning report number P27-027, proposed updates to the planning fees, user fees, and changes bylaw, Bill 185, cutting red tape to Build More Homes Act. And who would like to speak? Oh, good morning, Brad. How are you?
Good morning, Mayor, and good morning, Council. So this report contains an update on Bill 185 and the proposed modifications to the planning user fees and service charges as a result of those changes from Bill 185. As Council just heard in the previous report, Bill 185 did receive royal assent on June 6th of this year. Staff did prepare a previous report to Council back in May, which contained an overview of Bill 185 as it was originally proposed. And since then, some changes have been made to that bill before it did receive royal assent. That included updates to the appeal rights, upper tier planning responsibilities, development charges, a framework for regulations with respect to ARUs being exempt from certain zoning provisions, and exempting community facilities from zoning provisions and application processes. One additional change is also that it removes the municipality's ability to require pre-consultation before certain types of Planning Act applications can be made. As a result of that ability to require pre-consultation being lost, township staff are recommending updates to the user fees and charges bylaw to ensure appropriate collection of fees, to ensure that the taxation revenue is not responsible for the expenses incurred as a result of the review and processing of Planning Act applications. Essentially, the proposed changes would split the application fee into 3 different types to ensure that the same fee is collected by the municipality, no matter whether an applicant undergoes pre-consultation, full or partial, or whether there is no pre-consultation completed. So the 3 different application fees would be a fee without any pre-consultation, a fee with a stage 1 pre-consultation completed, or a third fee where a full 2-stage pre-consultation has been completed. The proposed updates also include a restructuring of the resubmission fees, just to ensure that appropriate fees are collected for the re-review of revised applications, which normally would have been completed through the pre-consultation stage. The pre-consultation fees that Council previously considered are proposed to remain in the bylaw because applicants may undergo voluntary pre-consultation. So just to ensure that those fees are still there, they are proposed to remain. But that basically sums up the report. And if Council has any questions, staff are available. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Well done. Any comments from Council? Councilor Taylor.
Yeah, through the mayor to Brad. So Brad, on page 6 of your report there, I don't know if you could even share that. So can you just describe what does the red mean there? Like you've got pre-consultation, initial peer review, 6985 in black. And then you've got application for draft plan with stage 1 pre. So I'm just looking on what the net costs are to the applicant.
If I may, Mayor, through you to Councilor Taylor, those are those 3 different application types. So the first one with the $9,610 would be the application fee for a draft plan of subdivision application. If a stage 1 pre-consultation had been completed by the applicant within the last 12 months. If within the last 12 months, the applicant had undergone a stage 1 and a stage 2 application, pre-consultation application, then the application fee for the draft plan of subdivision would be $5,250. If the applicant had not completed any pre-consultation within the last 12 months, then their application fee would be the $10,660. Essentially, this fee structure here just allocates the fees in the same manner so that the same amount would always be collected, whether it be through pre-consultation or just exclusively through the application for draft plan.
So just back to my question through the mayor. What's the net cost to the applicant? Is there a net increase here that has been subsidized so far by the taxpayers?
Ms. Mandeville?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Taylor. I just thought I could maybe jump in and shed some light. If Council recalls the presentation we did just a year ago, maybe around a year ago, about our processing. So this is just a return basically to our previous process, but we did hear from some consultants that they wanted us to keep pre-consultation as an option. For example, just today we received a stage 2 pre-consultation submission, which is not mandatory by law anymore, but some consultants did want to keep that process. So what we're trying to do here is just reflect, if you pay for the pre-con, you don't pay again that money during the actual application process. So to answer Councillor Taylor's direct question, we always try to have no impact to the taxpayer so that new development pays for new development, just as our DC consultant was talking about. However, sometimes there is an impact to the tax base just because of the nature of planning, and some applications take longer than others, some get appealed, but overall, we're not proposing any changes to the fees. We're not proposing the amount of money collected. We're just proposing to collect it at different times because of the recent legislation. So maybe that's a little bit more clear.
Yeah, it's okay. It's more of a timing thing as you go through. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any further comments? Any questions? Okay, Madam Clerk, do you have a motion? Oh, sorry, Councillor Mennings, go ahead.
Thank you. So through the mayor to Ms. Mandeville, so just so that I've heard that correctly, there is no increase to the fees. They've just been reallocated at different points in the process. Is that correct? It's a net zero effect?
Ms. Mandeville?
Through the mayor to Councillor Mennings, that is correct. We have not proposed new fees. We have just proposed when we are going to collect those fees, just because of the recent changes with Bill 185.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments? Madam Clerk, do you have a motion?
Thank you. The motion reads that planning report number P24-027 dated June 26, 2024, with respect to updates to the planning and user fees and charges be received, and that Schedule A of Bylaw 2023-35 be amended to reflect the changes in planning fees as detailed in staff report P24-027.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Cox, second by Councillor McIntyre. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. 1.2.2 planning report number P24-28, adoption of the updated new official plan. Mr. Robinson, welcome.
Good morning, Your Worship and members of council. What's before you today is for consideration is the adoption of the official plan, which has been a work in progress for a few years now. The second public meeting, because there were some modifications to the document based on further staff review since you previously adopted the official plan, and further staff review is undertaken, and review with county planning staff was also undertaken on the document, as well as the many changes that have been made to reflect the ongoing Planning Act changes and policy changes that have come about from the province. So what's again before you today is the adoption of the document. You are not the approval authority of this document. The approval authority is the County of Simcoe. So what would happen if council decides to adopt this bylaw today is the package would be put together and sent off to the county for review, and then ultimately it would end up on a county council agenda in the future for approval. Now the county, they can either approve the document that you send over to them, they could approve the document with modifications that they so choose or suggest. So that's effectively the process that that gets undertaken. I just wanted to briefly provide an overview of some of the comments that were provided at the public meeting last week and how those comments have been considered. I know you were all there last week, and there's a few folks that spoke, and I just wanted to make it clear that we've had an opportunity to talk to many of those individuals following the meeting and provide feedback and responses to their comments. So specifically, Mr. Kevin Wood provided some comments on a property in Washago, and we've had a chance to follow up there. Specifically, that property, there are some environmental features that are identified through mapping on that property, and we suspect that before any development proceeds in that area, he will need to undertake an environmental impact study to delineate the limits, and there'll be some further, we believe, refinements to the zoning bylaw and OP as a result of whatever the results of those future EISs determine. But it is within a settlement area, and there are some EP features on those properties.
So Jamie, sorry, just to that, the property that you're speaking of, even if they do an ESI on it, capacity at our lagoon doesn't warrant it being developed. Is that correct?
Yeah, sorry. So I should have added to that. There is a GA2 note that's applied to the mapping there because of the lack of servicing that exists in that area. So at the time of a development proposal coming forward, not only would there have to be that EIS completed, but there'd have to be a servicing analysis done to identify how the servicing could be done on that property. So I think effectively what that means is development on that piece of land is sometime out into the future, notwithstanding the fact it is in a settlement area.
Well, Jamie, while you're discussing the different applications or the people that you spoke to, are you okay with us just weighing in and asking questions before you move on to the next one? Is that okay?
I think that's likely the best way to proceed here. Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Deputy Mayor Cox.
Yeah, through the chair to Jamie. But Jamie, I thought that there is in the OP a distinction that if you're in a settlement area and there is no chance of you getting hookup to water and sewer, you would still be allowed to build on your lot.
Through your worship, that's reflects the comment that I provided that if development is proposed, a servicing analysis would need to be completed.
That's what you meant by servicing analysis. Okay.
If it determines that it can't be serviced or would never be serviced by municipal services, then individual services could be an option to consider.
Yeah, so there is a positive to that it's not that can never, it just depends on I'm sorry, I didn't realize that's what it was called, service analysis. Okay, thank you. Because we have the same in Coldwater.
So just so, Councillor McIntyre, are you okay with those comments? Because that's in your ward, and I'm sure that Kevin will. Okay. Just before you carry on to the next one, Jamie, if it's okay, Jim may have, or Councillor McIntyre may have some questions.
Yeah. Yes.
Through the mayor, just a quick question to Jamie. Have you looked at the size of the site, and is it possible, even though there are some EP restrictions there, is it possible for septic to be put in? And secondly, I know that from here to the corner, just not far away, is the stormwater and so on that site. You may know that that's across from the Lions Club Hall on Hamilton Street. So I just wondered if after an EP is done, is he running against the wall because he still will need water and septic? Can he do a well? Can he do a septic? Is that possible on that site?
Your worship, to the councillor, I'm not specifically myself familiar with the details of the site and the intricacies of it. I know he has had a pre-consultation meeting historically with township staff. So I'll just pass that question over to Ms. Manderville, and I think she can provide some insight.
Thank you, Ms. Manderville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further to Mr. Robinson's comments and to Councillor McIntyre, I think what we need to focus on here is just like any other property, in order for a development to occur on this property, since it is a commercial property, a site plan control agreement is required, and work through that process is required. So as part of that process, you have to do an environmental impact study or an EIS. They would have to do a servicing analysis to see how the property would be serviced. They would have to do a functional servicing to see how it would be from F. And I do apologize, I'm having computer issues. So if I'm breaking up, let's just roll with it for now. So just like any other property, all of these development things would still have to be undertaken. The OP does not, this current proposed OP doesn't propose to change any of that from the existing situation. So these folks have already started the pre-consultation process. We already outlined what they would need for an application. None of that is changing as part of this process. So they can still continue on at the previous direction we provided to them.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. You can continue.
Okay, the next individual that spoke at the meeting was Phil as a party. Hope I've got that pronunciation correct on the last name. But so this gentleman also owns property in Washago, and he referenced an old site plan agreement that he believed was on the property. The township, we've had an opportunity to review that file, and we believe the site plan approval is no longer in exist or valid on that property, and that should he propose development in the future, he would be subject to a new site plan control agreement. In addition, there's also natural heritage features that are identified on the lot, and he would have to, similarly to the last proposal, have to do any environmental review to understand the limits of those features and development potential. So staff has had an opportunity to discuss this with him, and that's kind of an overview of what's existing. But there's no real modifications or changes that we believe are necessary to the OP at this point to address his comments.
Councillor Minnings.
Thank you through the chair to Mr. Robinson. So from that explanation, the question I had written down from last week from Mr. Asaparty was wanting the plan to recognize the C1 designation on the property. So from your explanation, I'm just wondering if that happened or not, because if you can just explain further to me if what he requested is actually being put forward, or if, yeah, I don't know what the C1 designation.
So if I could just clarify through you, your worship, C1 refers to zoning, not the official plan designation. So that's a different document. The official plan, the designation that's proposed through this official plan is the same as what's in the current plan. So there's no changes to his property that are proposed through this process. What he had provided comments on, in addition to what you've identified, related to a historic site plan agreement that he believed was on title of the property, which we believe is no longer valid or in effect. He has the ability, as I mentioned, this document gets sent to the county for approval. So if he can produce additional evidence and documentation related to that site plan control agreement, that can be provided to the county through the approval process. And it may, if that exists, it may necessitate some modification to the OP through that process. But at this point, we haven't been provided with that information that would necessitate a change today. So
thank you.
Okay, moving on. The next, Mr. Prentice from Kinnear Side Road provided a response just about complexity and extra studies being required. and trying to make things as simple as possible for folks in navigating the development process. The OP does and is required to provide lists of studies and guidance on those studies that are required when development applications are proposed. We believe we've tried to, in this version of the official plan, make it more clear in terms of we've added the additional natural heritage schedule to identify where those natural heritage constraints specifically exist and how they're referenced in the where they exist and the policies that apply to those features. In addition, through initial pre-consultation with staff, staff has the ability to waive studies or reduce the extent of studies on a case-by-case basis. So we believe there's the flexibility that's included in the official plan to take a common sense approach where appropriate to these proposals and future development proposals and study requirements.
Councillor Minnings.
So through the chair, thank you for that. My recollection of Mr. Prentice's comments to council was that that's not always the case, a case-by-case study, and where staff have the flexibility not to request certain reports. So for example, when we're thinking about additions or renovations to existing properties, that there's still a number of reports that are required, and that the official plan could name some exclusions. And I think that was the request. So currently it is on a case by case, but from what I heard is that that's not working well, and there's an opportunity in the official plan to further define that so that the person doing the renovation, et cetera, the addition, the property owner doesn't have to start and provide quite as many reports. It just seems a bit arbitrary now, because it is on, it's a decision on a case by case. So I'd like to see some more structure around when it's absolutely required and when it's not.
I think I can, I'll just weigh in on this if I may. To Mr. Prentice's application, his lands are designated green lands. So I think, Jamie, if you could just shed some light, if you wanted to build something on green lands, you would have to do an EIS, if I'm reading the report properly, and come back to staff with whether the person doing the EIS who's qualified disputes, or at least has reasons why the part that he may want to develop doesn't, how am I going to word this?
I'm just going to jump in here. I think
okay, I think you know where I'm going with this.
So I'll give you an example, is that if someone's proposing an addition to a house, because that's what this gentleman was referring to, and I think my understanding is he does building design and house design. He probably runs across these situations fairly frequently in designing additions for individuals. So in these sorts of situations, someone proposes an addition to their house. Let's say there's a water course within 30 meters or even within 120 meters of their site that could be considered fish habitat. If you're within what's called adjacent lands to a natural heritage feature, the OP would specifically say you need to do an EIS. Or if you're within 120 meters to a wetland and you're proposing an addition to your house, the OP says you need to do an EIS, for example, if there's a Planning Act application triggered. So what the flexibility is that's built into the official plan, just to make it clear, is if somebody's got landscaped yard that exists where they're proposing the addition, and there's vegetation between at the edge of their yard or the features on an adjacent property, staff have the ability to say, you know what, in this instance, because of the proximity here, and because we're dealing with a landscaped yard, we're not cutting down trees or we're not encroaching specifically on the feature, we're not going to require an EIS in this instance. Like, that flexibility is built into the plan. So I can't draft policy that like requires additional flexibility or describes the certain situations where it will be exempted. We just, that would be too difficult to imagine the numerous situations where it really has to be done on a site-by-site, case-by-case basis.
Thank you for that.
Ultimately,
And just a subsequent question.
if someone had a concern that staff might be being too harsh in requiring a study, they could make a deputation to council and say to council, like, we don't believe this is necessary. And council could make the decision of not requiring a study, for example. But I believe the flexibility is included in the document. And we've been, I believe, as flexible as we can be in those provisions.
Thank you. Councillor Minnings.
Sorry, thank you. So then what I would call an appeal process is the deputation to council if someone in the future wanted to disagreed with what was required. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's always an option for folks.
Okay, carry on then, please.
All right. We also received some comment or had a deputation related to a previous committee of adjustment meeting. So that meeting was conducted in accordance with the Planning Act. So there's no changes to the OP. That wasn't a specific comment related to the OP. We did receive comments from various agencies, from the school boards, from utilities, and those comments have been incorporated into the document. We did hear comments from committee members at that meeting related to things like short-term accommodation or short-term rentals related to garden suites, watershed planning. We are recommending that the OP proceed as proposed to at the previous meeting with respect to those items. The other comment that was specifically received.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I'll just jump in through the mayor to Jamie. That's the one that I'd mentioned, Jamie, that since it's not an approved use on anywhere in the township, delete the phrase STR, just don't even have it in there. Well, what harm is it if it's only mentioned once or twice in it? I don't want to see it anywhere in the plan.
So through your worship, there's a mention of short-term rentals within the implementation section where it lists the types of bylaws that council could consider in the future. Not that they have to, but that they could. So it's listed there. If council would like that removed, then that could be added to the resolution that gets considered today. There is a recommendation within the staff report. We've also provided the clerk with some additional add-ons to that resolution. One of those options would be the removal of that reference, as Councillor Taylor has mentioned. So we've kind of prepared for that. So right now, the bylaw that's in front of, the official plan that's in front of council for adoption has that terminology in it still. If you'd like it removed, then that could be added to the resolution, and then before we ship it off to the county, we can make that change. So,
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I through the mayor to Jamie, I think that would satisfy me, and I think it's a pretty easy thing to do today. We've got council here, and hopefully council will agree with what I'm asking there. Thanks.
So Jamie, my question, if we support Councillor Taylor's request, is this going to hold the OP up at all?
No.
Okay.
I'll just say, I don't think it changes one way. It doesn't affect things one way or the other. And so we're kind of in your hands on that.
Deputy Mayor Cox?
Well, through the chair, I was just worried that if we didn't mention it, would that mean that 5 years from now or something, it would look like we had our heads in the sand and didn't even recognize there was anything going on?
Ms. Woodrow, I think she wants to say something. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Burkett. I just wanted to add to what Jamie's saying. And what Jamie said was that it's just an example. It doesn't mean that council is bound to do any regulations for STRs. It just enables you, if for some reason it comes up as an urgent matter, it's already in the official plan. Doesn't require an official plan amendment should council be in a position where they're facing an urgent situation to address STRs. So it's proactive, but doesn't force you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Taylor, how do you?
Oh, I still want it deleted. Period. Thanks.
So, Madam Clerk, to Councillor Taylor's comments, and I'm not sure how the other members feel, how would we go about this?
Yeah, so it'll be, if that is the general concurrence of council, then we will include that in the motion that comes forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jamie. Oh, Deputy Mayor Cox? You're on mute.
Oh, yeah. Would that not be one we should do? Because if it's added and some want it and some don't, that'll affect. So shouldn't each one be like an amendment and we go through each one so we don't get to the end and then wonder why nothing's happening because we all disagree on one thing or another?
It's entirely council's choice as to how they want to approach this. The motion itself has not been tabled yet, so it can be updated before it is tabled. Once the motion is tabled, if council wants to split it, then they can split it and consider it as separate amendments.
I think splitting it is something we should consider when we get to the motions. Anyway, Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I concur with splitting it. I do not agree with its removal. I think the precautionary approach makes sense. These are a reality in our community. Mm-hmm. We haven't chosen to do anything with them yet. The day may come. The day may come for a whole lot of reasons, but this is a real business. It's going on, whether we like it or not. And we've chosen to deal with it with our bylaw approach. And putting our head in the sand like an ostrich makes no sense to me at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, Jamie. Oh, sorry, Councillor Jansen.
Yep.
Sorry, Jamie, have you concluded your presentation?
No.
Okay, carry on. I have a feeling my question will come up after.
Councillor Minnings.
Same as Councillor Jansen.
Thank you. Okay, Jamie, go ahead.
Okay, the other comments that were provided at the meeting related to a property in Coldwater, which was 2956 South Horn Road. So that property, there's been a request through this process to have that property. That's the property to the east of the Novani or the sink factory site. So that property is located within the settlement area. It's currently in the current official plan. It's designated employment area. There is a request to request to have that property designated to settlement living area as part of this official plan review process. Now, just looking at my notes here to make sure I cover this off correctly. So the request to you, council, from these folks is to consider that redesignation of these lands through this OP review to a settlement living area designation. So the OP before you that we've provided for adoption today maintains the designation that historically and currently exists in the official plan, which is the employment area designation. So that is their current designation. You as council today, you have the ability, as Mr. Taylor identified in the previous item, to propose changes to this plan that before it gets sent to the county. So it's completely within your purview, council. If you want, you could direct staff before this document gets sent to the county. You could direct them to make a modification to the document to change these lands from employment to settlement living area. So that's completely within the scope of what you're allowed to do. From my perspective and staff's perspective, the reason the document before you has the designation carried forward from the previous or current official plan is that I can't support that a redesignation through this process right now. And specifically, the reason for that is that the provincial documents do permit the conversion of employment land. So this would be a conversion. And the attempt would be to convert these lands if what these folks are asking for is a conversion of these lands through this official plan process. So effectively, they're asking council to undertake a conversion of their lands outside of what's called the municipal comprehensive review. And the tests or the requirements under the provincial documents for a conversion are there needs to be a demonstrated need for the conversion. And the reason I'm not able to recommend support is because I do not have the justification before me that demonstrates that there's a need for the conversion of these lands to residential purpose. And the background information on that, Your Worship, is that the county undertook an MCR, which is it's effectively a fancy word for a growth management exercise. And that exercise identified that in the township of Severn, there is enough supply of residential lands to support development throughout the planning period, and that there's an insufficient supply of employment land. So right now, to cut to the chase, the justification does not support the conversion. Certainly things have changed since the MCR was completed, but there's still no specific justification that has been provided to me that would support the conversion through this process. That's why I, as a professional planner, can't make that recommendation. Again, you have the ability as council, if you want to make that change to the mapping.
So Jamie, just to add to that, how can we as a council make a recommendation based on no application being put forward to us as to what they're looking for? As far as sending an email and saying that the land should be converted to residential based on what? Like there was nothing in there that based it on what background or what studies or what needed to be done or what justification. In my understanding from the county's perspective as our deciding authority, we are in a deficit of employment land. So to your point, how would we vote in favor of redesignating these lands when we're taking employment lands and rezoning them residential? Isn't that in contravention of the Planning Act? Just so I understand better. And if you could speak to the Celeste Phillips Planning Act policy number 6.5.6, where it says request to delete policy of the new official plan as it does not conform to provincial policies. If you just explain that to council as well, please.
Yeah, yes, I can. And I was going to go there next. So we've prefaced that, so that's fine. Council can make any decision they want. Council makes political decisions all the time. They're not professional planners. Council's council. So you don't necessarily need planning justification to make a decision. But what I will tell you is that whatever decision council makes, as I alluded to or referenced at the start of the presentation, you are not the approval authority on this. You adopt the document, it gets sent off to the county, and the county would then make whatever decision they so choose on this related to this OP as a whole or this specific item too. So Your Worship, you have the ability without an site-specific application before you through this process to change the designation on this property. That's well within your rights to do that. So that answers the first question you proposed. The second thing you were asking about was the inclusion of a policy within the official plan. So I was provided with a copy of a letter that Ms. Phillips had prepared for her clients. And she does reference the OP not including a policy that's specific to a section in the growth plan that allows for these conversions to take place outside of a comprehensive review. So one of the modifications that we're suggesting get made get included in the resolution as a direction to include a policy to that effect to address the comment that she's provided here. So that would enable these folks, if they, like, let's suppose council doesn't change the designation on their property, there would be a policy in the official plan that mirrors the growth plan policy and also what's proposed through the upcoming provincial planning statement, which is the document to replace the growth plan and PPS, that would allow for or facilitate conversions outside of a comprehensive review. So I am recommending that that modification be included as this document gets passed through to the county. But effectively what that policy does require is it's that demonstration of need has to be addressed. And none of this precludes, even if the document were to stay as written, it would not preclude these folks from submitting an official plan amendment to shelter under the current growth plan policy. But to address Ms. Phillips' comment, I would recommend that we include a policy in there related to the conversions outside of a municipal comprehensive review.
Thank you, Councillor.
That really summarizes my comments and summarizes the comments that have been proposed. But I just wanted to make it clear in closing that you have the ability to do whatever you want. I've said that a number of times. And but at the end of the day, the approval authority will have final say, and they can make whatever decision they want on that matter too. So,
Councillor Minutes.
I thank you. So to you, Worship and Council, I mentioned at the onset of the call that today I can't be on this call beyond 11, and because of something that's come up personally today. So I'm already late. I'm concerned that the vote hasn't taken place. So maybe I'm looking to the clerk that because I have to sign off now and we haven't decided on anything, do I miss my opportunity to vote, or how can that happen?
You're muted.
Yeah, so through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Minnings, if there's one particular item that you're concerned about, such as the short-term rental deletion, we could probably take care of that now. If Your Worship is fine with that, we can have that motion considered at this point. Then all of council's here. If council still wants to continue to discuss the balance of the official plan, I don't think we can advance that motion yet. And we can also bring forward Mr. Robinson's most recent one, which is the addition of that extra growth plan policy amendment as well. So we could bring those two motions forward. So you're here to vote on those two. And then council can continue on with the official plan discussion after that, if that works for the rest of council.
Is it, Councillor Minnings, is it just the short-term rental portion that you want to vote on?
Yes, that too, but I was also interested in the land designation and the opportunities that are before us now to change those. It's just that it's just the timing's not working out for me, and I'm not happy about that, but I can't change it. So if we could do the short-term rental at least.
Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you.
Okay, we could have a motion for the short-term rental, please, Madam Clerk.
Sure. The motion reads that all references to short-term rentals be removed from the draft new official plan.
Councillor Taylor.
I request a recorded vote, please.
Certainly. I just need a mover and a seconder.
Moved by Councillor Jensen. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to clarify previous comments. So if we were to remove all reference to short-term rentals, it does not prevent us from discussing it in the future.
Correct.
Okay.
We can discuss it in the future, but if something comes forward and we need to do anything with the short-term rentals, we'll have to come back, do an OP amendment. Is that what I heard? So if something needed to be done very quickly, it isn't going to happen very quickly, because that would take time, would it not, Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, through your to your worship, I'll give you an example. If if you were to want to proceed with a licensing bylaw on its own, just a licensing bylaw, no zoning, nothing else, just licensing. I'd probably, without having it included in your official plan right now as one of the bylaws that council might seek to pass, I'd probably want to get a legal opinion on whether you could pass that bylaw if it's not specifically referenced in your official plan. I think you could because it's a municipal act bylaw, but typically you reference bylaws that you're going to enact in your official plan. So I'd want a legal opinion on that. If as Ms. Woodrow mentioned, by including it, it simply enables you in the future to consider those bylaws absolutely without an OPA. So it just might mean you may have to do an OPA first. I'm not sure. I need a legal opinion on that.
Would we have to go back to the county for this approval, or is it something we can do in-house at this level of government?
Andrea, sorry, do you have OPA approval authority, or is that with the county? That's with the county too.
Ms.
So yeah,
Woodrow.
you have to go back to the county.
It becomes very complicated. It does.
Thank you, Mayor Burkett. Jamie is correct. Yes, the county is also the approval authority for official plan amendments in the township.
And they could say no if we take it out now and want to put it back in. There may be, yeah, okay, we'll just leave it at that. Any further comments? Councillor Minnings, are you still there or are you left? Okay, Madam Clerk, if you can go ahead.
Okay, so just rereading the motion. So it's that all references to short-term rentals be removed from the draft new official plan. Recorded vote has been requested by Councillor Taylor, and I need a mover and seconder.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Taylor. Second by Councillor McIntyre.
Okay. Recorded vote requested again by Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor, for or against?
Yes.
Councillor Jansen? That's a no. Councillor Brennan?
Did you say no, Councillor? No.
Thank you. That's a no. Deputy Mayor Cox? That is a no. Councillor Minnings?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor McIntyre? No. And Mayor Burkett?
No.
Okay, motion fails.
Thank you. Okay, Jamie, did you want to speak to anything else? Oh, Deputy Mayor Cox, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to speak to what Jamie had spoken to before. My issue, and I'm glad that you would put that forward that due to Celeste's letter, but my what I heard yesterday is the county would look at it exactly what you said. And the other reason I can't specifically do that is there are other people out there who want conversion. We can't just pick one developer and say, here, we'll convert yours. We'd have a lineup coming in at us saying, well, how come you converted them? There was no application. They didn't put forward. They were asked to put it forward. And the county is not going to turn it down. This OP, the way it was described to me, is this OP is just taking all the information from 2010 and updating it so that it is now in conformance with what is going on in 2024. We pass that. Then we look at growth. And then that's when we look at the employment land and do we have enough? Because we've been told we don't. And that's when they can look at the conversion, or if it's needed, we can switch and do things. I just have a hard time saying to one developer, yes, when there's other people out there and they've known to put the application in. But that's, as long as it's covered under before, if you think you're going to add something that'll appease them, that's fine. But I think it's already there from what I've heard from the county, from you, from our planning staff, that it's no problem if they want to come forward and convert after this OP. I just don't want the county to look at this and say, well, we're already going to do that. They could take that out and they could still pass our OP, right?
They could, correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Jansen, did you have your card up? Councillor Jansen.
Thank you. And through the chair to Mr. Robinson, I do appreciate the explanation, the full explanation that you provided there on these lands and the redesignation. I agree with Ms. Cox's comments about, I remember Cox's comments about following the proper procedures and the planning process. I guess I just wanted to clarify. So when we talked about the issue that was identified with point 656, you're saying that there would be, we would inform Simcoe County that to include a policy outside of the municipal comprehensive review. Is that how you clarified it? So that there would be an avenue for through the planning process to redesignate these lands.
Yeah, through your worship, just to be clear, whether that policy gets included or not, there is an avenue through the Planning Act process for them to make an application and they can shelter under the policy in the growth plan now or the new proposed policy in the provincial planning statement. It adds some clarity if we include a similar policy in our official plan. So yes, the recommendation would be that when this document's forwarded off to the county, that we include a similar policy within our plan.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just to the chair, to the mayor, being not a planner, but a member of council, I've seen this property my lifetime, and in reality, I can't see anything happening there, just as we've heard from the planner, and I think we should try. I think there is a need for houses there. We've got water and sewer for the houses. This is a great place for the houses to go, and I would support what the planner was saying here in this case.
Deputy Mayor Cox.
Through the chair, it's not that I don't support it. I just want it to be known that it can happen without it. And there is not sewer capacity for that right now.
Councillor Taylor.
But we're adding sewer capacity, so down the road that it will be. It's better there in a service community than a non-service community.
So if I may weigh in, we did hear Mr. Robinson say that council can do as they wish, but there is a process. There's a planning process that we all need to adhere by. The applicants could have made a formal request to apply to have the zoning changed on it. When I sit in this chair and make a decision, I make a decision based on the information that's provided to me. I haven't seen an application for said property or what they would like to do with it. We've heard our planner, our director of planning speak. We've heard Jamie speak, who we hired to help us with the OP. There's a process. There's nothing stopping the applicant from moving forward, applying to have those lands designated. Our approval authority is the County of Simcoe. Both the deputy mayor and I've conveyed to the owners of this property through the director of planning at the county that they absolutely will look at the application, but because we are in a deficiency for employment lands and because there are other applicants in our township that are looking to do the same thing, we can't favor one applicant over another applicant. We need to be fair and consistent and vote in favor of each applicant that has applied to change employment lands to residential. Do we need residential? Absolutely. I'll just leave it at that. Councillor Taylor.
Well, just further to what you just said, have there been other requests to change settlement to?
Yes, right here in our report. If you read back, I can't find it, but there is one in Ward 3 that wants to change the designation from residential or from employment to residential that our staff has been working with. Because we're in a deficiency of employment lands, we have to abide by provincial policy, which is the PPS, and there is a process. The applicant needs to apply and go through the process. There hasn't been a formal application made as of yet. Now, correct me, Mr. Robinson, if I'm wrong.
No, you are correct.
Thank you. It is in here, Councillor Taylor. I just don't know which. Oh, here it is here. 8675 Highway 12. It's number 1. Respectfully request that the property known municipally as 8675 Highway 12 be redesignated from settlement employment to settlement living. So how can we vote now on one applicant in Coldwater and not vote on this applicant as well? And I think there's others as well. Councillor Brennan.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Jamie, it would be nice, it seems to me it would be nice if after our plan is approved, there was some, again, I hate to use the word comprehensive since we're using it so much today, but I mean, if I saw us take some or industrial lands out, I'd want to know where the new stuff is going to be. And I'd also want the shortage gap to be taken care of simultaneously. I'd want a comprehensive approach to it, not all over the map. Is there some way in the planning world that you live in where, you know, in the next year or two or something, we could sort of comprehensively look at the whole issue of employment lands and say, okay, here's the decisions, we're going to fix the gap, here's maybe some trade-offs, blah, blah, blah. Isn't there a better way of doing this outside of this current process?
Through your worship, I think that's a really good point that you've provided. So as Ms. Cox identified, or Councillor Cox identified, the what this exercise is doing is an update to the official plan that doesn't look at the growth management aspect of it. The reason we can't look at the growth management aspect of the OP is because the MCR, or growth management study, that the county did is with the province for approval. So subject to it getting approval, the next phase of that exercise is what you're describing right now, Councillor, which is, all right, we're short, or we've got too much of this or not enough of that. And for example, if we don't have enough employment lands, which is what it shows, where's the correct location and which land gets designated and which land doesn't get designated, or what gets brought in and what gets changed. So that is a process that will unfold, but it doesn't unfold as part of this exercise today, because the number game has to be approved first by the province, which this OPA 7, which is the growth management exercise of the counties, been sitting with the province for approval. So unfortunately, we're sort of stalled on this growth management piece. And it is a bit of a conundrum, because the province is saying we need more homes, and we've got developers like the various folks that have commented saying we want our lands designated, and we're saying we can't go down that route yet because we need the numbers approved by the province first before we can look at which lands get designated to support employment and residential growth in the future. So yes, that is an exercise that will happen in the future. It's not part of this.
So just supplementary then, just to clear. So we could do, or in theory then, we could do a calling all developers, if you will, and say, look, anybody who's got this in mind, you've got to get in your applications or whatever the notices, whatever that you were going to call it when this process goes down. In other words, it could be a level playing field across the road where there's time limits on people to ask for considerations, and then we do the whole package. Is that not reasonable?
To your worship, that is what happens. Yes, as part of the phase 2, as notification goes out that this is being undertaken. And if you'd like your lands included, let us know. And then the township and county process associated with evaluating which lands get included and which ones don't look at all aspects of planning. They look at transportation infrastructure. They look at servicing infrastructure and what's the most cost-effective area to service. And those sorts of considerations. So yes, it gets done. Yes, folks have an opportunity to put their hand up, and yes, it gets incorporated in the process. And what would flow out of that would be a future amendment to your official plan to add or remove or change designations based on the results of that exercise.
So the most efficient thing we can do now for people that want these changes is appeal to the government to make the decision so we can move on. To me, that's what we want. Get these decisions made so we can move on. We're not the problem here.
If I could just add to that. So Councillor Brennan, at the county level, they are our partners. They're our approval authority. They have assured us that they are going to work with our staff because they understand that we're in a deficit of employment lands. We're in a deficit. To change employment lands now to residential, absolutely, 100%. I want to support our developers because where the employment lands are located, it does lend itself to housing. It does not lend itself to employment lands, but there's a process that we need to go through. And the county's OPA is still held up at the province. When it becomes approved, The county will work. We are partners with the county. The county's going to work with us to find other areas, to your point, of employment lands that are more, that lend themselves better to being employment lands, and allowing the developers like this developer in Coldwater, the developer in your ward, to be able to redesignate those lands residential. And there's a process. And that process is something that I've been assured at the county level they will help us with. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Judith, again.
Councillor McIntyre.
Here he comes. He's coming.
Thank you through the chair. Just a comment and a question. First of all, I'm sure the residents would like to see this area as a settlement area and take the burden of the commercial or the industrial out of it. My question is, if we do not go ahead with the, as Jamie suggested, we have the ability to do here. If we do not go ahead with it, could the applicant one day come back to us and say, is it possible to convert this because we've found another area that could be suitable for employment lands? We certainly have enough space for employment lands. It's just a question of designated and where. And if we have the ability to make the decision that Jamie's saying we have today, I'm sure we have the ability one day down the road to designate some other area employment lands. I'm in a quandary just because the residents there, I'm sure, would love to see this as a residential area, but I think we have to follow the rules and follow the plan, like the chair, the mayor said, that make an application and over time possibly have this property designated a settlement area. As long as I have assurances in my mind that there's an opportunity for them to do that one day. I don't see the urgency of it at this moment even to vote on it, because we do have to follow the rules. Have you got any comment there, Jamie?
No, I think you've summarized it correctly, and it's similar to what the mayor's identified. So I don't really have anything else to add.
Okay. I guess in that light, I'll just leave it at that, and then we'll answer the question when we call the vote. Thanks.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, Madam Clerk.
Oh, good. That's what I was going to say. Call the vote.
You're on mute, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. You would think after this many years I'd have this straight.
It's all right.
So the only other change then that is coming forward to be proposed is to include that growth plan policy that Mr. Robinson proposed. So we'll vote on that, and then we'll do a consolidated final motion.
Thank you.
So this one is that the growth plan policy G2.2.5.10 be added to section 6.5 of the draft new official plan text. Proposed policy 2.8.2.5 in the draft provincial planning statement 2024.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Brennan, second by Councillor Jansen. All in favor? That's carried. Clerk.
Okay, and I'm just looking for concurrence that we're not doing a separate motion on the South Warren Road request. We're just going to treat them like every other application and request that's included in schedule.
Yes.
Okay. So the final consolidated motion reads that planning report number P24-028 dated June 26, 2024 with respect to the adoption of the updated new official plan for the Township of Severn be received, and further that council endorse the public agency and council comments and associated direction contained in attachment 11. And further that council adopt the updated new official plan as attached to the report, subject to the following additional modifications requested by council. This would be adding in the growth plan policy 2.2.5.10 to section 6.5 of the OP text, proposed policy 2.8.2.5 in the draft provincial planning statement 2024. And further that the clerk be directed to forward the adoption record to the County of Simcoe as approval authority, and further that the Township of Severn request the County of Simcoe to review the land budget stemming from the population and employment growth forecast, i.e. residential employment land supply from the county MCR to reflect updated data.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Cox, second by Councillor Jansen. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Madam Clerk, I'd like to jump ahead to J1. Councillor Jansen has to leave by noon. If we could, correspondence from the Coldwater slow pitch gates at Coldwater Ball Diamond.
Certainly.
Councillor Jansen, did you want to speak to it?
Thank you very much. Through the mayor, I've received numerous communications surrounding the gates being closed at the Coldwater Fairgrounds. Through background checks with staff, I do understand that complaints came forward in the past related to vehicles within the fairgrounds and safety related issues, and that's what led to the closure of the fairgrounds. The concerns that are coming forward right now are related to access, mostly around access due to accessibility issues or mobility issues. I guess the distance from the ball diamonds to the parking lot at the Coldwater Arena or the curling club area. Some people are saying it's a bit lengthy as well. There's lots of potholes in the parking lot as well as within the fairgrounds area as you walk from the parking lot to the ball diamonds. Now, I do understand that from the communication last year and from some of the communications that I received, that last year for the baseball games, the gates were opened and then closed at night on a daily basis to allow access in and out of the ball diamonds. I guess what I'm looking for is a solution here. If we can come up with a solution to allow access to the fairgrounds areas for parking for the baseball games, as well as I've also been aware of a request for a porta potty at the small diamond, the small baseball diamond, which is used by the minor baseball league, in order for our youth to be able to use the washroom in a quick and timely manner. The small ball diamond is quite far from the location of our washrooms at the moment, and that would assist players to be able to use the facilities when needed, rather than having to make the trek all the way over to the washroom facilities. I'm not sure exactly if I'm to make a motion on that or if this is up for discussion at this time. How would this work?
I'll let Director Belfries weigh in on it, Councillor Jansen, and then we can go from there. That's okay. Councillor Belfries.
Good morning. So I guess just a bit of history on why the gates were closed. From my understanding was that it was a recommendation from the Health and Safety Committee that was in 2022, which was endorsed by council due to some very close calls, from my understanding, of kids on the playground that were almost hit by cars. And that was the reason why the gates were installed. So we do have the direction from council from 2022 to keep the gates closed. As for opening the gates, it's still, if we open the gates, we still don't get away from the liability of an incident possibly happening. That once the gates are open, that does open us up to that situation again that the municipality was trying to avoid. The fairgrounds themselves are a green space. They're not seen as a parking lot per se on the track or close to ball diamonds. In giving a key to a volunteer in the past, that put the municipality at risk for liability, as that individual did not have training on traffic control or anything like that, or was visible. There were concerns from staff in the past through last year that the gate was left open at times too, and not locked. So in looking for, we haven't gotten away from that liability to the municipality of any solution there. other than keeping the gates closed. I do understand the issue around the distance, but that is not uncommon in 80% of the ball facilities I've seen in Ontario through visiting them. There are many times there's a walk from a parking lot to a ball diamond because parking isn't generally near ball diamonds due to the fact that balls land on cars and things like that, and access. Currently, right now, the municipality isn't saying that the fairgrounds are accessible either. The property itself isn't accessible. That is something that we're looking to address in the fall through a master plan process where we could look at these kind of improvements. But right now, the distance to walking and getting to, like, coaches carrying their equipment to the ball diamonds, those kind of things, doesn't seem unreasonable in comparison to other municipalities that have the same ball diamond complexes. So I don't think we're getting away from any liability by opening the gates. We're just increasing that action that may happen again. So I can actually have the clerk can pull up. I can pull up an example of, Allison would like to pull up an example of a ball diamond where I coach rep ball, and I'll show you here. So this is a facility in Whitby. I'm standing on the ball diamond. You can see my shadow at the bottom where I take the picture. That big tree line way off in the distance on the other side of the hill is actually where the washroom is and the parking lot for that facility, which has a soccer field to the right there of where that baseball player is sitting. There's actually a soccer field right on the other side of that tree line too. And there's actually 2 soccer fields. So in my travels around, it's not uncommon. I recognize the questioning of it, but it's not uncommon that there's many facilities like that it is a bit of a distance to walk just for safety concerns of balls and general areas of play and not having cars around general areas of play. I'll leave it at that for now and take any further questions.
Councillor Jansen?
Would you be able to comment on the ability to put a porta potty at the small baseball diamond to facilitate the youth that are playing there?
Sure. As through the mayor to the councillor, as I said, I don't really see the washroom as a long distance, and putting the porta potty in adds an extra $3,000 to $4,000 a year to our expenses to put one porta potty in there, and having we would have to coordinate with staff because the site is locked by gates, and that becomes an issue of coordinating with the pump out trucks, of making sure the gates are open to get in there and pump it out. I understand it's a bit of a walk, but it's not something that's uncommon that I've seen in numerous other facilities. That the walk is about, I would say it's 100 yards. So it's not overly that far, but it's just the extra costs. Like at current state, we don't get a lot of revenue from balls, so we'd be adding a further cost to that operation that may affect rates in the future.
Okay, and then just going back to the parking lot facility and the hazard that exists, I guess, or was identified with the children's playground and the driveway that's in front of the children's playground. When we talk about health and safety, we look at how to mitigate risks. I'm wondering if there's anything we could do to place bollards there or fencing or something of that type in the short term to allow the gates to be open while ensuring the safety of our youth that are using the playground.
Through the mayor, councillor, like we have discussed whether fencing is an option, but that would be on a more permanent. The bollards doesn't really get away from the risk of a kid running out in front of a car driving by or something like that, and the speed of a car. Like those were the issues when the gates open. And I would never want to put on that kind of traffic control on a volunteer of how to deal with that. They don't have Book 7 training or anything like that. So I think just having that traffic in close proximity, like realistically, the gates only really get open for the fair, and that's in a very controlled usage at that point, just to bring items in for the fair and get them out. But during the fair, there's not a lot of vehicle traffic through there. So.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cox.
Yep, through the chair. I guess my concern also is it's not just the playground. There's a road that goes right beside the skateboard park that people drive on. And I don't know that in other parks, and it is a park now. It didn't used to be a park. We didn't have all the playground equipment. We have, over the years we've added, and my concern is vehicles, children playing, and they should be able to play because they go there during the day or times with their parents, and they run and they play. And I just wouldn't want a vehicle to back up or hurt someone, and people to be ending up going, why would this happen? And I also have heard from the other side of the argument. And I guess what my concern is that we've had all these letters, we've had a few emails on the ones that want the gate open, but have we put it out there really for the people who don't want the gate open? And I would call them the silent majority. I know the residents on Robinson Street are quite happy that the cars aren't racing back and forth and down, and they also don't get the noise and the complaints at night. I'm sure the people on the other side of the homes on the other side of the racetrack feel the same way. So I think it's something that Director Belfry has spoken to, is that this is something we need to look at in this master recreation plan, the layout of our ball diamonds and the layout of our fairgrounds, and how we can accommodate everyone and how we can keep the park the way it is and the ball, all of it. And I just don't want to do something that ends up with the gates left open at night or somebody gets hurt, especially when it's been required by health and safety. And I would like to know what our insurance company probably is more happy that those gates are closed than the fact that it becomes a roadway that can go around and around. And I don't know if anybody on staff can speak to
that. Director Belfry.
Through the mayor to Deputy Cox, I haven't spoken to our insurance company, but I would concur that our insurance company is probably happy that it's gated off. Like with anything like that, it reduces our risk. So opening that up to vehicular traffic on a regular basis, I'm not sure they would have even been aware of that in the past. But knowing just generally how you deal with insurance companies, they would probably be happier that it would be closed to reduce risk.
And I would say that would put us at risk if they don't know it's closed or they think it's closed and we open it without qualified people and something happens. I just feel terrible if anything would happen to a child. And as far as the porta potties go, I don't have a problem with putting them up for a month or so. I understand parents worry. They're 8-year-old or 7-year-old, if they're busy with the ball diamond and they can't go, the child runs across over there. We've had issues in Coldwater with the police coming in for people who are trying to pawn drugs and things. And I understand parents' concern over losing sight of their child and where are they, and are they back yet, or did they buddy up and did somebody come back? So I don't have a problem with that one, but the gates I can concur should stay closed.
Director Belfry, I heard Councillor Jansen say, and I'm not sure because I haven't been out to have a look, but the roadway is the roadway that has potholes. And I know that if you could work with our Director of Public Works, I'm sure we could take care of the roadway. But I think whoever's doing the master plan for Coldwater, does a member of council sit on that, or is that a separate board that looks at that, or how is that going to unfold? Because I feel that if we're going to have that, I think we should look at the problems we are having now with that and somehow come up with some sort of solution.
To you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so the master plan will be for the fairgrounds. It'll be a process where we'll bring in a consultant to run public sessions. So we'll get all the public input. Council will be fully involved in that process too. It'll be basically a redesign of the fairgrounds, looking at what we want to do there and then the cost to implement that plan. So it's something we had in the budget this year we're anticipating doing in the fall. So all kinds of public input from council. So and dealing with all these issues.
Perfect. So Councillor Jansen, based on what I'm hearing, I think for safety reasons, I can't support opening that gate only because we have a playground in the middle of a road. And, if we make that decision and a child does get hurt, we'll never forgive ourselves. As far as those potholes, I'm sure the Director of Public Works could work with our director to somehow fix those potholes that are on that section of road where it's gated. And I know there's a cost to the porta potty, but we do have little kids, and I'm happy to support a porta potty for this year until we come up with a solution from this group that's going to look at our master plan for that park, because it is a gem, and I think we need to jig some things around and have some outsider come in and look at what needs to be done and make it safe. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I do understand the safety concerns. I work in an environment as a safety rep. So I do understand that side of things. When it comes to the master plan and the fairgrounds, are we when we're looking at the redesign of the fairgrounds, do you know if they're planning on putting a roadway with parking lots within that section, or would it be that the parking lot of the arena would serve as the fairgrounds parking lot?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I guess I would say everything's on the table at that point. Like, we know we've had requests for movement of the ball diamonds. We know we have requests for increasing the skateboard park, those kind of things, and other implements. So I think at the end of the day, you're looking for what serves that site the best. And I would say there's a lack of accessibility pathways to ball diamonds right now too. So I think those are all in that, and what that looks like, and everything will come down to the plan. So everything's on the table, and it'll be costing all that out. So.
Okay. So supplemental reading the room here. So members of the public that do have concerns could bring them forward to the transportation, the fairgrounds master plan and the redesign public process to provide their input. I'm wondering if the members of council do have an appetite in regards to the porta potty being installed in the area of the small baseball diamond.
I'm okay with it. Do we need a motion for that, or can we just put our hands up, Madam Clerk?
If the general concurrence is to include the porta potties, I'll just include it in the motion.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, any further comments?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cox.
Yeah, through the chair to Director Belfry, and I would assume that they will attach it to the fence so it's more secure.
To the mayor, the deputy, the porta potty, we'll find a location where it's secure.
Yeah.
No
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, Madam Clerk, do you have a motion?
Okay, so the motion read that the correspondence from the Coldwater slow pitch regarding gates at the Coldwater ball diamond be received for information, and that a porta potty be provided at the ball diamond during the baseball season until the Coldwater Fairgrounds master plan is finalized.
Thank you. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Jansen. Would you like to move it? Okay. Second by Deputy Mayor Cox. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll go back to 1.2.3, Planning Report number P24-021, processing of the Planning Act applications by the township. Ms. Woodrow.
Thank you, Mayor Burkett. So the report before you outlines the provincial directive of building more homes faster, as we're all aware, and as such, staff are seeking council's direction on how to address planning applications moving forward. So there are three options set out in the report. Option one is to follow our current process, which is first come, first serve. And this is in keeping with the presentation by the former CBO and the senior planner on October 25th, 2023. Option two would be for council to consider prioritizing residential development applications with large numbers of proposed units or lots, so more than 10 lots or units in this particular case. And the third option is direction to prioritize residential development applications with large number of lots, in addition to non-residential developments such as commercial, institutional, or industrial that are in close proximity to residential developments in order to have complete communities. So basically, those are the three options at this time. There are pros and cons contained in the report for each. And so at this point, Ms. Mandeville and I are looking for council's direction on how to proceed, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Cox.
Through the chair to Ms. Woodrow, I'm in favor of one, status quo, and I know that our staff are very helpful. I've heard them talk to people when I've been standing. You know, when somebody's forgotten something, they bring it back, but they don't throw them down to the bottom of the pile. They just work through everything with them, and I think that's a fair one. And you're right, it is inclusive. Thank you,
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the mayor. Yeah, I kind of like a 1A. Like, I'm wondering, when you go in and do the first consulting and then you bring it back, say it's 99% complete, but technically it goes to the bottom of the first pile, but can't there be a second pile saying this is pretty much done, and it shouldn't have to go back to the bottom again when they've already done the work, and through either no fault of their own to make it almost complete, why they have to wait again. So I think we should treat everybody the same and try and be fair and try to speed things up if we can. And this going back to the original pile, I don't think makes sense to me.
Councillor Brennan.
Can you hear me? I'm trying a new button here.
Yep.
Yeah, just with regard to that, I can't imagine that the planning world would deal with a client to the 90 or 99% level without calling them before they toss the file and saying, look, there's a little tick in here. I want you fix.
Oh, you cut out, Phil.
I would have thought that that's part of the, to me, that's the logical way to do planning. You wouldn't just say, hey, Bob, there's just one little problem here, and so heck with you, you go to the back of the pile. I just, in my planning life, we never operated like that. If there was a little fix needed, we call Bob in, fix it, and then approve it. Can I get a comment from either the director or the senior planner on that regard? Because that other world just doesn't seem to exist, I don't think.
Ms. Woodrow.
Thank you, Mayor Burkett, through you in response to Councillor Brennan's question. So certainly we would try to be reasonable and use common sense, but in most cases, second submissions, third submissions on applications, whether it be residential or commercial, do have a substantial number of outstanding comments. So again, it's similar to the original application. A second submission may come in on multiple applications within several weeks of one another, with substantive comments still outstanding. So we certainly try to use common sense if there's only a couple of things outstanding, but it's not always the case.
I see Madam CEO. We better let Madam CEO talk.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have to go first. I just wanted to let council know why this is before you. I actually asked staff to bring it forward because at least once a month I chat with our biggest developer who says, we want to be first in line. We're bringing all these homes and all these eventual tax dollars. And what I always say to them is people who don't live here yet don't make council's phone ring. That is not what council wants. So they don't necessarily believe me when I say that. So we wanted council's concurrence on our first come, first served approach is what council wants. So that's why we're here. And I just wanted to follow up on Council Brennan's question. I think Andrea answered very well. Just that the challenge is always, I don't know about the small applications, but I know on the big applications, what a developer sometimes thinks is close is not always what staff thinks is close. And there's some discrepancy there. So that's the challenge. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the mayor, to Lori's comments, I think she nailed it on the head there, that by going with options 2 and 3, we're not looking after our current residents, and they're the ones that we should be looking after, not our potential residents. So I agree with option 1, and if things could be sped up, I'd be even happier.
Deputy Mayor Cox, thank you.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. In my opinion, it's the people who live here who bought a single lot, and all they do is have a couple little things. Like, we'll deal with them and do it. Like, I'm very sorry. It's not that I'm anti-development. It's just that I have watched over the years so many developers, and I could name you about 15 different ones, that all of a sudden they come before us and people go, well, how come it took so long? Well, it wasn't our issue. It was the fact that we sent them back to do something, and 3 years later they pop in, and then they're upset because our staff are saying, well, we're trying to get something else done. So one.
You went on mute. You hit your mute button.
I see that, yeah. And so I'm very happy with that. Number one. Thank you.
Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you through the chair. You have to mute yours.
No, he is muted.
On the bottom right of your screen. Okay. Through the chair, just through the mayor, just so I can eliminate number 2 and number 3 and go along with 1 and possibly 1A, as Councillor Taylor said. I don't know how much, maybe I could be informed, how much of number 3 we have. I'm sure that the planning department would be very sympathetic to someone who's a need to open a chip shop or something on the highway, and could move that forward a little quicker if the season's going to go by. However, just so that I can support number 1-ish, what consideration is given to, if any, to the big developer if they come in and they plead that they have a short timeline because of trades? And is it just a straight, we're going to go from the stack system, first come, first serve?
Ms. Woodrow.
Thank you, Mayor Burkett, through you to Councillor McIntyre. Yes, we just use a simple, fair queuing system. You know, first come, first serve. That's the bottom line.
Any Councillor Brennan? No, can't hear you, Councillor Brennan.
Councillor Brennan, you
How about
to
now? We
there
go.
you
Okay,
go.
there-
You
there-
just
there.
needed to unmute yourself.
All right, thank you. I'm just loving this system today. Is it conceivable? I don't know, like what the forecast. I wouldn't understand the forecast like you planners would, but if you ever did have to go, like, it just seems to me, and I've said this at a previous meeting, the bigger developers have lots of planning expertise, and frankly, they should get it right the first time. And I think a lot of the time they don't get it right because they're pushing yardsticks one way or the other. And then that gets complicated. And I think that's what we've seen certainly in my 2 years here in council. It's usually some special thing that they want that upsets either fire or something. But if you ever did get to a situation where you needed, like you wanted to advance thing, is it possible? And this is not an idea from me. It's brought up by another member of council. I would like to pose this question. If you had a second planner on a pay-for-fee basis, I don't know if that could be justified or if it worked, but you want to go to the front of the line, you got to pay. Like, it's just the way it is. Is that a scenario? I like option A, so don't get me wrong there. But if you were to change it, is there a scenario like that that might be acceptable?
Ms. Woodrow.
Thank you, Mayor Burkett, through you to Councillor Brennan's question. If you were to add another planner for fee for service and the development application still required peer reviews of hydrogeology, ecology, natural heritage, that sort of thing, you're still dealing with a limited number of peer reviewers. So regardless of whether you increase planning staff, it's the other disciplines and specialties that inform our process. That's where the challenge lies.
Thank you.
So just to add to that, Councillor Brennan, my short time here, I know I've gone back to larger developers with site plans that need to be legalized by a lawyer, and we're at the mercy of the lawyers. It may take a week, it may take 2 months, it may take 3 months. And guess what? They say it's our staff. Well, it isn't our staff. You know, there's peer reviewers, to Ms. Woodrow's comments, that take their time. There's a coastal engineer that's in Councillor Taylor's ward that has taken 5, 6, 7 weeks to come back to peer review or look at peer reviewing what an engineer has done. So there's all these other factors that are in the queue that prolong the applications. It's unfortunate. There's only a limited number of them that are out there that do that type of work. And unfortunately, because of the growth that's happening, not only in our municipality, throughout the whole province, yeah, there's some huge challenges, some huge struggles. And unfortunately, the only people they can pick on is us. It's sad because we all want to make the files move forward, correct? It's just unfortunate that our hands are tied because of the outside agencies that we look to. Any further comments? Okay, thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do you have a motion?
Based on the discussions, I think we're going with option 1.
Yes.
Okay. So the motion reads that planning report number P24-021 dated June 26, 2024, with respect to the township's current standard for processing of Planning Act applications be received, and further that staff be directed to proceed with option 1 for the future processing of applications as set out in the report.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Brennan, second by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on, Madam Clerk, to general bylaws.
Thank you. Motion reads that bylaws number 2024-36 and 2024 through 2024-41 inclusive be and are hereby ready for a second, third time, and finally passed.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor McIntyre, second by Deputy Mayor Cox. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Announcements. Deputy Mayor Cox, don't you have an announcement? Sorry?
Sorry, my yes card was still up on the vote. Sorry.
Oh,
I do have an announcement. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
There's a Canada Day parade in Washago on Monday, and it starts at 1. And everyone is welcome to come and walk in the parade from council. All you have to do is wear a Canada Day shirt and a hat, and we're going to hand out flags.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just our Severn Sound hosted webinar scheduled for tomorrow is going to be actually Thursday, September 26th. So it's been put off until September. And I'll remind everyone in September when that comes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further to Judith's comments, we have pins on sale for $2. The Lions Club has a pancake breakfast and beer garden, and there will be a number of musical entertainment, 8 or so, 7 or 8 for your enjoyment. And the parade, it looks like it's going to be a resounding success because Judith ordered good weather.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. I think we have to go into closed session now, do we not, Madam Clerk?
Yes. So closed motion to go in is that committee resolve in a closed session that the meeting is hereby now closed to the public pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, SO 2001, Chapter 25, Section 2392, for the purpose of considering personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal local board employees.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Taylor, second by Councillor Brennan. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Do you have a motion, Madam Clerk?
Okay, yeah, I just was waiting for everyone to get rejoined back into our meeting. So the motion reads that the closed session adjourn at 12:23 p.m. and that the meeting is hereby now reopened to the public.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Brennan, second by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
The next motion will read that Public Works Report number W24-018 dated June 26, 2024 with respect to 12 Rhinebird Street access restoration be received, and further that the request for cash allowance be denied.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Taylor, second by Deputy Mayor Cox. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Confirmation bylaw, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Motion reads that bylaw number 2024-42 be and is hereby read a first, second, third time and finally passed.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Brennan, second by Deputy Mayor Cox. All in favor? That's carried. An adjournment, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Motion reads that this meeting is hereby now adjourned at 12:24 p.m.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor McIntyre, second by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? That is carried.
Have a
Thank you
great
very much.
summer, everybody.
Yes. Wow, what a long meeting for a council meeting.
Well, we had a lot of important things.
All right.
Look, I'll see you in Washago.
Yes, we'll